All right. Let me get it. Oh, let me change this. Well, to the original intro. Alrighty. Let me cover myself up for a second.
Warning. The information shared in these conversations and videos are intended for general knowledge and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered as legal advice or professional guidance. Additionally, any documentation or references to specific content are solely for the purpose of discussion and understanding. It does not imply endorsement, promotion, or support of said content. The views expressed in these videos and/or conversation are those of the individuals involved and do not represent any official stance or opinion. The content you are about to experience may contain strong language, including explicit words and phrases. This language is used for artistic expression and may be integral to the storyline or character development. It is important to note that the use of such language does not endorse or promote offensive behavior. Viewer discretion is advised, and please enjoy the show responsibly. Disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. The Canadian Copyright Act, Section 29, allows an individual to use copyright-protected materials when creating a new work, such as a mashup, and to post the new work online on a site like YouTube. Fair dealing provision for specific purposes like research, private study, education, parody, satire, criticism, review, and news reporting.
Na 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 na. I ain't never gonna give up. No. I know they wish I quit this shit, but I ain't never gonna give up. No. Ain't never thought I'd get this lit when I fell, but I'm on my way up. Whoa. I know they wish I quit this shit, but I ain't never gonna give up. Never thought I'd get this lit. Never thought I'd get this lit. I know they wishing I would quit and I would stop this. I know they wishing they could fit me in the boxes. I know they wishing they could sit me in the coffin. I know they wishing that my writtens wasn't hot shit. I'm a goat, I know they wishing I was not this. I got my soul, I know they wishing I would chop this. Wishing on my downfall, but when's the only option? I'ma do the rap and I'll let y'all do the talking. I know they wish I wasn't sipping, I had no bitches. I know they wish I wasn't pipping all yo bitches. I know they wish that I was sitting in the low ditches. But now I'm coming for it, gon' get it, no limits. I know they wish I quit this shit, but I ain't never gonna give up, no. They never thought I'd get this lit when I fell, but I'm on my way up, whoa. I know they wish I quit this shit, but I ain't never gonna give up, no. Never thought I'd get this lit, never thought I'd get this lit, yeah. I know they wishing I would give up on this rap life. I know they wish my kids would say that I'm a bad guy. I know they wish that all my words were just a fat lie. I know they wish that all my memories were sad times. I know they wish that they could bum me, make me hurt more. I know they wish that I was ugly and just dirt.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Happy July 4th to all my American crowd out there, okay? I hope you guys are not dealing with too much fireworks tonight, okay? I know it gets annoying after a bit, all right? But we're going to have some fireworks tonight here, all right? We got a taxation debate, okay? Should churches remain tax exempt? We got Wicked Wally versus jsurbanadventures. I hope you guys are ready for some fireworks. I appreciate you all. How we're gonna do this is we're gonna open up. They're gonna have a 6-minute intro each, and then we will open it up for them to go back and forth for an hour. Things get out of the hand, obviously. I'll be here to moderate. And also, so we'll be going for an hour. All your super chats at the end of the hour. We'll go a little bit more if things are going good, you know. But at the end of the hour, we will read all the super chats. Any questions you have, any comments you have, any of that, make sure you drop them in the super chats. We will get to all of them after that. And then we will open up the panel for people to come up one by one and ask any questions or give pushback on anything you want. And depending how many people want to do that, we'll see how long that goes. But let's get into this, ladies and gentlemen. Let's bring the debaters to the stage. We got Wicked Wally and JS Urban Adventures. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello.
For anyone wondering what the whole shirt says, it is better dead than red.
Nice. All right, so we haven't decided who is going to go first. So do you guys want to decide amongst yourselves, or should I flip a coin for you?
I can kick it off if you want.
Well, I thought we talked about it. I'm the affirmative, so I go first.
Yep, you want to go first? Go right ahead.
All right, let's do that. I'm going to put the timer here. So you got till it says 6 minutes, and I'll start it up when you talk.
But he's going to close. He's going to go last. Yeah?
Yeah. At the end, since you're going first, he'll end it off going last. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it starts when I start going?
Yeah, when you start going, I'll start the timer.
All right. Should churches lose their tax exemption? I say yes. I didn't originally have a strong opinion on the topic of churches and 501c3 tax exemptions, but my instincts told me it seemed wrong. After being challenged to this debate and thoroughly researching the topic, I've concluded that I was right, as usual. I've discovered many justifications for my initial response, mostly simply stating the converse for the best arguments that churches should retain their 501c3 status. The tax-exempt status leads to a multitude of small, unorganized branch-offs of the Christian church, as well as a rising number of cults and other religions. It prevents the church from taking a strong stance and playing an active role in local and federal government, and it violates the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment of the Constitution. As previously mentioned, I believe removing the 501c3 tax-exempt status from churches would reduce the amount of small offshoots from the Christian church and reduce religious diversity in America. My opponent will complain that this is a problem which leads to an uprising of megachurches. I would counter by questioning what his problem is with a robust, unified church congregation and foundation. I have no problem with a megachurch. My problem is with false prophets leading them. There are currently more than 200 denominations of Christianity in America, including Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists, all existing and profiting while defying the idea of Christian or Christ one. And that's just the Christian churches. L. Ron Hubbard, the famous fiction writer and founder of Scientology, once said, "Writing for a penny a word is ridiculous. If a man really wants to make $1 million, the best way would be to start a religion." Although not currently tax exempt, the Church of Scientology maintained its 501c3 status from 1957 to 1967, which helped them get rich. Secondly, the 501c3 tax exempt status hamstrings the church by preventing them from playing an effective role in government. I understand that churches are, for the time being, allowed to speak on certain issues, but they are not allowed to endorse or support specific political parties or candidates. As a theocratic Christian nationalist, I see this as a huge problem. If the church paid taxes, the congregation would mobilize, fully getting involved in running local, state, and federal government. With Christians united under one true church and that church running and endorsing the best candidate for every government job, we would become an unstoppable force in America. 68% of Americans identify as Christians, but currently many of them are too weak to even be bothered to vote. That needs to stop. The church needs to stop hiding from politics, drop the tax exemption, and get involved. If we pay a huge portion of the taxes and install strong Christian leaders in every branch of the government, we can demand more transparency and proper allocation of taxes. Lastly, I believe my opponent may bring up the Establishment Clause or the idea of separation of church and state. Although I disagree with church and state separation, I would argue that by churches being tax exempt at the cost of reserved speech and political inactivity, they are undeniably violating the Establishment Clause. The 501c3 tax exemption is the carrot on the string of communist welfare stick, which can only be pursued through silence and compliance. It's not so different than a poor person refusing to work in order to keep their food stamps, or a woman having babies out of wedlock and staying single to get more welfare. In order to maintain their special financial protection, the church is made beholden to government and must sacrifice their freedom of speech. This has led to a rising number of Christian non-voters who are quick to let you know that they don't get involved in politics. Instead, they submit to the laws of the land and render to Caesar what is Caesar's and work to elect the right Caesar. These and other reasons have solidified my belief that in order to form a stronger, more unified Christian nation, we must have churches pay their fair share of taxes. It may seem harsh at first, but once the church begins running its chosen candidates and showing up to vote en masse, we can have a major positive effect on our government and save our country from lazy, godless degenerates. I am not in support of more taxes. To the contrary, if churches paid taxes, I would support an eventual reduction on taxes for Christians and extra taxes for non-Christians. I am also not a libertarian who believes all taxation is theft. I just want transparency in spending and a more active church and government relationship. And that's it.
All right. And with some time to spare. Nice job. Thank you very much. And with that, Wally, whenever you're ready, we will start the time.
Okay. First off, I can't imagine a more brilliant way to lose a debate simply by showing up than to not only argue in favor of the government expanding taxation, but to do so on the 4th of July. The case being made is, should churches lose their 501c3 tax-exempt status? One of the main justifications provided for this throughout modern dialogue is that megachurches, televangelists, and fringe organizations that stretch the definition of being a church or a sincere religion at all, such as Scientology, exist. Therefore, all churches should be punished. A variety of solutions to address this include tightening the legal framework with bad faith actors in mind, and those are particularly viable. What is not viable is to say Kenneth Copeland and Joel Osteen are bad Christians, and therefore all Christians should be punished for the sin of their greed. Institutions can be captured by corruption, but the solution will never be to bring in the most corrupt institution of them all to provide the answers. Now, bear with me as I undertake a truly taxing effort. Modern dialogue on tax exemption for churches has been heavily influenced by overblown assertions that taxing churches would somehow amount to an enormous windfall for U.S. taxpayers. This relies on an assumption that churches generate profit as tax-exempt organizations when these organizations are required to put all funds into projects related to their cause after paying operating expenses. Claims are made this would allow the government to reduce income taxes for citizens across the board to as little as 3%. Estimates on how much the government loses in tax revenue to churches is as high as $71 billion. Now, even if I were to grant these numbers were correct, which they are not, the federal government takes in roughly $4 trillion in tax revenue annually. State and local taxes combined nationwide are roughly $2 trillion. The inaccurate numbers only amount to 2% of all tax revenue collected at the federal level. The real cost of tax exemptions amounts to roughly $2.4 billion annually across all churches and tax-exempt religious organizations. That accurate number is barely 0.06 of what tax revenue is for the federal government per year. Does that sound, by any measure, like substantial tax relief to the American taxpayers? Let's call it what it would really be. An extra couple billions of dollars that would line the coffers of the federal government that it is free to waste as it sees fit. That doesn't sound like a tax break for you, me, or anyone else. It doesn't even sound like capital gains. The true windfall in these numbers comes in the form of tax deductions available to American taxpayers who support their churches under the current system. Removing the 501c3 status takes this away from working class families and treats their contributions to their place of worship as taxable income. Removing 501c3 will only create more problems and leave everyone in an awkward position across the board, where churches are now at a higher incentive to earn more money and attendees have a lower incentive to give. Removing tax exemptions will make it increasingly harder for smaller community churches to survive until they can no longer exist. This will ultimately consolidate power and influence into churches with heavy cash flows, free to espouse incorrect theology, while costing many Americans the churches they love and support. A small church in the middle of Oklahoma has as much right to exist as a megachurch and has an even higher need to exist to service that community. Being tax exempt requires organizations to make their financial reports and tax returns public record. Without this status, this important transparency will be taken away. This will take no corruption out of corrupt institutions, but instead invites more corruption in right through the front door. The true way to manage corruption in churches is to push for community policing from parishioners. The people need to take ownership of the fight. People should be pulling these reports every year and airing their grievances to their church leaders. If money continues to be spent in manners these people don't intend to support, they need to vote with their feet and pray elsewhere in a church that harbors their values. We need better messaging to drive all Christians to better churches instead of allowing the government to tax them out of the churches completely. Ultimately, there will always be more Americans going to churches that are positive for their communities than not, and their spiritual health is important regardless of whether or not I agree with the theological particulars of their church of choice. At a time when we need more people unified than ever in the face of so much rampant modern degeneracy, I want to see more people in their churches, in good churches, than left out in the cold while the vipers loot and pillage the temples. And after this goes over so well on Independence Day, for our next trick, we'll try arguing on St. Patrick's Day that prohibition really wasn't all that bad of an idea.
Hey, I'm down for that. Let's go.
All right. Look at that with 30 seconds to spare as well. Good job. All right. And now we will open the floor so you guys can do your back and forth, and I'll be here to moderate if things get a little bit crazy. But whoever wants to start.
All right. Since you just went, I want to ask, do you think that those mega churches, the prosperity gospel guys, the Joel Osteens, do you think they would have got to where they are without the tax exempt status?
It's very possible they could have. We have no way of establishing whether or not they could, because this is the system that's been in place. Now, a lot of that is because they're able to put a lot of resources into getting that message out, and they do their mega tours. They've always had a big presence on television. Like Joel Osteen is not new. This goes back to, Kenneth Copeland and Pat Robertson before him with Christian television. And a lot of that messaging is ultimately, it's a lot of evangelicals and a lot of Protestants who get all the airspace on that. It's not so much the Catholic Church, even though there are some Catholic television channels that might be public access in different areas. There certainly isn't much of an Orthodox presence on television or radio space over the past 100 years. So they've had a foothold on the messaging regardless of whether or not they've been having to pay income taxes on donations. They do pay taxes to some extent. All churches and charitable organizations do. They have to pay their payroll taxes for any employees, and they have to pay taxes on any business ventures that are unrelated to whatever the mission of the charity is.
Yeah, if they're selling books or they have a coffee shop on the grounds, they have to pay taxes on that stuff.
Yes, anything that's unrelated to the mission. Now, as far as what a mission could be when you're a religious organization, that might vary. They could say we do religious education. So as them publishing textbooks and providing them to schools for a small organization could be their charitable mission that people are supporting.
Okay. So why couldn't all these small churches just unite under one large church? So like you see First Baptist, there's a million First Baptist churches. I don't know how they're all the first, but there's a lot of them. But
It depends on the denomination that you're a part of. I mean, I know people who drive 2.5, 3 hours to get to the nearest Orthodox church from their homes. And some of those have very small congregations depending on where they are. I've been to a few of them myself visiting. And the amount of travel people go to, it's like then, so if you're already traveling for 2-3 hours, depending on where you live, to go to a particular denomination, and that church is taken away because they can't afford the tax bills, where else is that person going to go? Do they have to then just pick a point on the map and say, I'm going to now pack up and move to another state? Or do they now drive 6 hours? Do they now have to do they now have to stay in a motel to go to a Sunday service, depending on their denomination? Now, I know that doesn't apply to a lot of Protestant churches, certainly, because those are everywhere. I'm surrounded by about 6 of them within my town. I could find one in 5 seconds.
well, why are these small churches going to close? Because they can't afford the tax bills. A lot of churches don't even pay, or they aren't 501c3 exempt, and they just Form 099 it, and then they have to be more transparent. They show that they're giving out as much as they're putting in, and then they don't. That's a way that they can get out of it.
Well, some of those churches could have very big pocket donors. Some of these other smaller churches may not. You could have a small congregation that's all working class families that may not be able to afford to chip in very much week to week. I mean, Scientology does not need tax exemption. They've got money for years.
Well, they had it when they started. They lost it because they were profiting.
Yes, and they had the legal fight to get recognized as a religion. That's separate from whether or not they have tax exemption. But even if they don't have tax exemption, look who they attract. They're an organization that gears themselves towards attracting elite celebrities. So they've got money for years with what those people pay to prop up the organization.
So I could start a small satanic temple, which is tax exempt, and not have to pay land taxes on that. And all the people around me are going to be paying for my land for me to have a satanic temple.
But the same thing would be applied to a synagogue or a Muslim or a mosque or a Catholic church. We may not personally like that would exist, but under the current system, it's fair.
Yeah. Well, fair is not always good.
You're also paying for a synagogue in your town. You're paying for the mosque then by that logic.
Right. And I don't want to pay for any of them.
No, I can understand how that's reasonable, but again, if you're going to make churches profit motivated, how is that making the situation any better when you have organizations that, like mega churches that are already mired in corrupt leadership in some cases and corrupt messaging in some cases? They're just going to be pushing harder to hustle for more dollars than they already get by hustling people.
Yeah, and they have these giant, lavish buildings that they don't pay property tax. And then sometimes they'll build a parish. What's it called? Where you have the people come in and live on the property. Partition. I can't remember the word, but
I'm not sure specifically what the term would be myself. I don't know how a lot of those mega church campuses are organized.
Well, I think that's like a Catholic church thing where they have the nuns and they have
so something like a convent or a monastery
right.
equivalent. You're thinking, okay, then I understand what you're talking about then.
So then a bunch of people are living there. None of them are paying taxes on that land, and everybody else is paying the taxes for them, whether they go to that church or not, whether they support that denomination or not, which is another thing. All the denominations, all these small churches popping up that you mentioned, I don't want 200 denominations. There's 35,000 denominations of Christianity in the world. That's not Christian. It's supposed to be the body of Christ. We're supposed to be one. There's got to be one true church.
Yes, there is. It's called the Orthodox Church. Everyone should go convert to it, and we can sew this up within 24 hours. Big happy ending, game over.
Yeah, and the Orthodox churches pay taxes in every country in the world except America. And
They have
in England, I think.
There's a different historical standard in there where the churches are, but even then the practices are a little bit different, and it depends on some denominations. There's an Armenian bishop who intends to run for prime minister to oust the guy who's been doing a pretty shit job for Armenia the past couple of years, especially in the past 8 months with how it's gone there. But he still has to seek a special dispensation to suspend his duties as a bishop in order to take in the event he takes political office for 4 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. So there is a little bit of a different standard. But even then, in other countries where like Serbian Orthodox had a lot of protests over the license plate issue a few months ago, but the Serbian Orthodox Church still didn't go out and said we're officially endorsing the protests. That were people and some of their pastors doing that on their own. At least officially on the record, that's what was happening. Yeah.
What was the numbers you gave? You said 2.4 billion. Were you saying that would be the tax take off of the churches?
Yes, that would be roughly the revenue from all churches and religious organizations nationwide would amount to just about $2.5 billion a year.
That's a super lowball number because the numbers I saw ranged from 11 to 150 billion.
But that is assuming that they're actually that these organizations that are nonprofits are actually generating profit. So there's likely some different calculations involved there. What's happening is that if you're a nonprofit, essentially you're supposed to end every fiscal year with a net income of zero. Whatever you've got left over after operating expenses and then any other mission activities, you're supposed to be investing into projects that are a part of the organization. Okay. So again, it's a drop in, and that's where part of the problem is. It's a drop in the bucket under the current system with how much the federal government takes in. Hand the federal government that rakes in $4 trillion a year, an extra $2.5 billion. They're just going to piss it away on something stupid. They're not going to be benevolent with that money in any conceivable way. I certainly wouldn't trust them to. They're not going to cut our taxes with it. You and I aren't going to see any gain from that.
With our current government, with our current system. But that's my main point, is that if churches are tax exempt, then we can't get involved. The church can't get involved in politics. Wouldn't it be nice if the church started saying, let's find the best guy for the job out of the church body, and let's support them. Let's run them in all of our local governments, in our for president, for judges, for governors, mayors, everybody. Let's find the best guys for the job and let's run them, and let's all get behind them. 85% of Christians are right-wing. 68% of America is Christian, but a lot of them don't vote. I think 40, the number I saw in 2015, it said, I think 42% don't vote.
Now I've heard this argument, and the thing is that technically under the Johnson Act, churches can be politically active. They just have to go about it in a nonpartisan way. We can't say the quiet part out loud.
On issues. They can talk about issues, but they can't talk about candidates or parties.
We can't endorse a particular campaign. We can't endorse a particular candidate, but churches can host debates with candidates if they want to, provided they're making it clear, like, look, it's an open floor. Every candidate in this election is invited to speak here.
You got to be soft about it.
You have to work within the current framework. So it's not a hard framework to work around. Like you said, if 85% of Christians are conservative and we're putting out nonpartisan information on the issues that aligns with church doctrine, that's going to be a generally conservative message. People aren't going to misinterpret it. No one's going to look at a pamphlet about abortion issues and say, I think I should vote Democrat if they're a conservative Christian.
Well, that would be nice, but that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of rainbow churches coming up, a lot of transformer churches, all sorts of different denominations popping up everywhere, and they all want to get rich because we don't have to pay taxes on this land. We can have people live here and they don't have to pay taxes, and we could take in all this money. And it used to be that before we had welfare, that the church took care of people because we didn't have a welfare system. Then America gets welfare in 1935, and now the church, that the church's dollar used to go farther than the state's dollar towards helping people, but now I don't think that's the case.
Because yes, and that's part of that is because, I will admit, we incentivize people to marry the government in a lot of cases. That's been what's happened. Now, but welfare versus charity is completely different. All you have to do is fill out an application, and plenty of people scam the welfare system all the time. There is waste for days in the welfare system. So to me, that's a completely separate issue from whether or not churches are being taxed. I don't see the connection there. Because if we're talking about dismantling the welfare system, I agree, but that's completely separate from this.
Yeah, if we had
because churches still provide aid. Like there are churches take up collections and they provide for needy families in the communities all the time. They're still engaging with people on a one-to-one basis in their communities that need help, particularly around holiday seasons. They have families to feed, or they have people having new children. They need help with diapers and other needs, and they're helping those people.
Yeah. Are you like on all taxation is theft type of guy?
I believe in many cases the mentality behind some of those taxes can be unethical or immoral. So if in the case of an income tax, I would say there is a mentality behind the concept, whether or not it is legal, whether or not the Constitution permits it, which I know it does. But the philosophical mentality behind an income tax is that to a degree, the government owns your labor. Okay. You start taxing churches. There's no way around the argument then at that point that if churches are paying into the system, churches now work for the government to a degree.
Right. Who was it? John Marshall said the power to tax is the power to destroy. I don't think I agree with that, but I think we need to pay our taxes, and that's part of, if we're going to live in an industrial society where we're growing things, we're building things, the roads, the military, the police. If we want all those nice things, then we need to pay into the pot for it.
Yes, I'm not completely opposed to all taxes, but as I said, the philosophical argument is different from the application of the income tax. That's why I say it's hard to get around the fact that there is a philosophical perception that the government owns a portion of your labor because they take it from you every week. If the government starts taking the money that we give to the churches trying to get the money they need to stay afloat. They have to make up the difference in all of those taxes. And the churches are essentially now working for the government. They're paying into the system. They're working for the government, no different than you or I are by that logic.
If they start paying taxes, you mean?
Yes, if they're paying taxes, right. They work for the government rather than being fiscally independent of the government.
Right, and that's why we need to take over the government. Peacefully.
You had to get that in.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not. Yeah.
I should have set a timer for the words "all taxation is theft" and see who brought it up first.
I had it in my intro.
I had determined that I had promised myself it wasn't gonna be me.
I
More
put it
than
in my
anything
intro because I was wondering if you were you thought that, but you got me.
No, I
You
believe
made
there are certain
Go ahead.
taxes that are completely unreasonable. I believe the death tax should be abolished.
Like inheritance tax.
Yes.
Yeah,
I believe
that's
or
crazy.
any kind of death tax where if you have over a certain amount of assets, the government swoops in, takes 40% before the will is even divided up, essentially,
Yeah, that's crazy.
and decides like, no, everything you've worked for, you don't get to leave this to your kids or your grandkids. Go fuck yourself. We need half of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that the donors or the tithers would not be able to write off their tithing if churches lost their tax exempt status. I wrote that down as one of the best arguments for your position. But my rebuttal would be if you're tithing to a church so that you can write it off, then you're not tithing for the right reasons.
It would no, and I'm not saying people solely do that, but it is a benefit that they're allowed under the current system. They're allowed to,
A
because
lot of
under
people
the
do. That's the only time they give, and it's really just for that write off.
well, standard form deductions allow basically assume X amount of charitable giving. If you look at how the standard form deductions work when you fill out your taxes, they give you a good faith amount, basically say it's $500. Now, when you're actually itemizing your taxes, which would be something people with more complicated taxes are doing, the people who are giving X amount per week, when they're itemizing, those are the people that are benefiting the most from that when they go back and do their taxes. Doesn't mean they're getting all that money back, but it's reducing their taxable income for the year to a degree.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, oh, you gave your church $2,000 this year, here's $2,000 back. No, it's not free money. Most people, it's surprising that in a lot of cases when you bring this stuff up, people, especially when they're young, are very deluded about how tax deductions and tax credits work until they actually have to start doing taxes.
Right. And I'm currently like a homeless Christian and I work at nights, so I don't even go to church. I'd like to find a church. I live in Salt Lake City, so it's mostly Mormon churches. Um, but I'd like to find a church, find the denomination that's right for me and all that. I would love if I'm paying taxes to the church and then my church is getting involved in politics and we're putting the right people into government and then they say if you can show that you're a member of a church that's paying these taxes, you don't have to pay as much taxes, and I would start going to church right away. I mean, that wouldn't be the only reason I would start going, but it would definitely be a motivation to get to a church for other people, for everybody.
See, I understand where this is coming from, but it's not a guarantee. You have plenty of leftists who are professed Christians who go into office and they're not being guided by any of the principles of their faith to any extent at all. They're just shilling for whatever the leftist policy is, and they're towing the party line. They're not going to. So if you're a leftist and you want political action from Christianity, you are not going to get anyone who does better as a lefty than what they're already getting. Now, are we necessarily going to get better than we currently get on the right as far as Christian conservatives? We might not. That's putting a lot of faith in people who are going to run for office, and generally, you're not getting a lot of people in office who aren't just there to kiss ass and shill for the party line.
Yeah, but we're gonna run people. We're gonna find the guys that are best for the job, and we're gonna run them, and we're gonna vote for them because the church is gonna say, "Hey, we're paying taxes. We're gonna get involved. We're gonna make sure we know where our money's going." And that it's being spent on the right things. That it's not all going to Ukraine. It's going to go towards what we want it to go to. We're going to make sure the right guys are in there. And everybody's going to vote. We're going to have church voting day.
Oh, they can organize people to vote. They just have to do it in a nonpartisan fashion. Like, let me look at this here. So we can organize voter registration drives. That's something we're allowed to do under the current framework. We can't come out and say we're doing it with the hopes and intents of helping a particular campaign or candidate, but it's essentially what we're doing while still not handing money to the government. There's a lot of wiggle room that we can play within under the current framework, and we can move towards similar results. We just have to be smart enough to play the game the same way a lot of other people play the game.
Yeah, but currently women are on the rise in churches. Men aren't going to church as much because it's soft. It's all music. It's all lovey-dovey. They got a rainbow flag out front, and the women are showing up. So when they're doing their voter drives and they're being nonpartisan about it. They're just like, we need to go vote, guys. And who are they voting for?
And you're bringing up part of the problem with the system that you're advocating the approach for. Is you're going to end up with a fight over who ultimately is going to be guiding and dictating policy in that direction. And there's a very good chance you're going to see this hypothetical of Christian politics getting dominated by people who have incorrect theology, non-conservative messaging, pro-LGBT messaging, pro-feminist messaging, where you're kicking a huge hornet's nest that's going to do more damage than it may help if they can start outright giving people endorsements.
Yeah. Well, what happens so Beto O'Rourke recently with the Equality Act, and it was Loving versus Virginia. They said the government can't make a law restricting same-sex marriages. And then Beto O'Rourke comes out and says, if these churches aren't doing that, they need to lose their tax exemption. It hasn't happened yet, but the way the country's going, I don't think it's that far off.
Well, specifically under marriage, that's a completely different thing, because under the current legal framework in the country, the church doesn't hold a monopoly on marriage. Now, that were it up to me, I would say yes, it certainly should. I think state marriage is worthless. It's
right,
more than worthless in many ways. But we don't have a monopoly. There's nothing preventing people from going to a town hall and getting married, going to a courthouse and getting married. So they're not being denied a service just because one particular place would not service that. And and again, people who are going to be looking to have same-sex weddings are not the people who would probably be going to church in those cases anyway.
A lot of them are. They want to force the church to do it. And if they made some sort of law like that, or a certain president gets in that says that we're going to do this, we're going to force the churches to do this, and if you don't, you're going to lose your tax exempt status. It's like when the coup happened, and they said, if your congregation is not 6 feet apart and masked and took the Vaseline, then they shut their doors. And if the churches try to resist that, what's the noose that they have around their neck to threaten them? We say we take away your tax exempt status.
How many churches? Well, how many churches do you think would have survived lockdown if we didn't have tax exemption prior to 2020? You probably would have seen a lot of churches close their doors, not reopen ever by 2021.
Well, they had the CARE Act, and they gave a bunch of money to churches and stuff,
but it's not, and still a lot of businesses never reopened, or businesses that reopened, the people didn't come back in the numbers, and within a year a lot of businesses were closed anyway for good.
Also, I don't like this idea that if the church has to pay taxes, they're going to shut their doors. When Jesus held church, it was on a dang mountainside. 4,000 people show up. It's a mega church. which is again why I don't have a problem with mega churches. I have a problem with whoever's leading the mega church. And there could be great mega churches. If we're filling stadiums and it's a good man of God leading it, I don't have a problem with that.
No, they're filling stadiums because they're bringing in rock bands that are basically singing "Jesus is my boyfriend" for an hour and a half, and they're not doing anything to make Christianity better. They're only making rock and roll worse.
Right, I know, but I'm saying if we had, a strong church family that could fill a stadium and it was a good leader and a good service, then I wouldn't have a problem with that. I would like that. But why do we have to have the building? And why can't it just be, you can meet up in your backyard with all your friends and pass a hat around, put the money in the hat, and then go door to door and look for people to help out with that money. Like this lady is single mom with 3 kids and she needs her sink fixed. We got a plumber here. Take some money out of the hat, go buy the stuff and fix her sink.
Yes, that stuff is called people being good neighbors. That's anyone can do that.
Well, it's Christ-like, and
yes, I'm not disputing that it isn't. It's called being a good neighbor to people.
Yeah,
anyone can do it. But as far as having an organized church that was established by Christ, well, number one, that would only be the Orthodox Church. It's not the Protestant churches, and that's part of the problem with when you're going back to how you have churches that are being very pro-feminist, that are being pro-LGBTQ, that are being pro-gay marriage. The problem is that those are a lot of Protestant and non-denominational churches that have no governing authority that say, hey, if you take money and you start shilling this message, your church is excommunicated and we're throwing you out. They don't have those. You're talking about pastors that in the grand scheme of things don't answer to anybody. And that's part of the problem. That's part of a problem with non-denominational churches in general, but it doesn't have anything to do with the tax exemption.
Okay, but so the Orthodox Church is huge, and it will be able to survive if they have to start paying taxes on their land and taxes on the tithes and things like that. And then all the little churches that aren't going to make it, they could say, why don't you incorporate under us? And we'll spread out and make a network. And all these little church buildings that can't afford the taxes, we all help them pay that together. And then we all over the country say, let's make sure the government's spending our taxes in the right way.
Well, they're able to keep small and struggling churches alive right now because under a jurisdictional structure, and the Catholic Church can do it too, is they can declare a church a mission church, so that larger, more successful churches are taking up collections to help them pay the bills and keep moving forward and try to grow back their congregations if they're in a struggling area, or if they're they've had a decline in membership for whatever reason. But it's difficult to square that you're going to make churches more money motivated by taking the tax exemption away, because if they're paying all taxes out to the government, then they're going to have to make that up in some fashion.
I don't want them to be money motivated. I want them to,
if they start paying out a lot of extra money in taxes on top of operating expenses, they're going to have to become money motivated by necessity in a lot of those cases. They're going to be so. And again, part of the problem is like those, you have people who are no longer able to, because the messaging and the optics of it are going to be very bad, whether or not people are tithing for good reasons or they're tithing to get a tax deduction on top of it is irrelevant when now the messaging is, well, essentially you're paying dues for your family to go to church, and then a portion of that goes to the government.
Right. Well, some countries, like in Italy, what they do is they have a required church tax. Where it's not, Germany has a required church tax, but Italy has an option where you can have 7% of your total taxes go to the church of your choice. It doesn't add anything to your taxes. It doesn't lessen your taxes, but you just allocate a certain chunk of your tax money is going to the church, you know.
Well, Italy has an
I
odd relation.
I just want to interrupt really quickly just to let you guys know if there's any like main points you want to get to. We got a little over 20 minutes left. Also, I just wanted to say you both shout out to you both because like I've had to do like no moderation here. You guys are fucking both
We're being
wicked.
very nice. I was
It
hoping
seems
for
like you both came very prepared. I was expecting some blood, but hey, I like this. This is really productive. Chat, don't forget all of the super chats, any comments, questions you have, they will all be read at the end of the hour here. So and yeah, so a
Everybody,
little over 20 minutes. If it gets really turned up, I'll give another 20 minutes, but you know, a little over 20 minutes. So if there's any main points you want to get to, make sure you guys get to that. And yeah, good job. And guys, I've been sharing both their channels. Make sure you go to both of them. They're both live. Hit the like on their lives. Put some comments in the chat. Get them in the algorithm too. Okay, go ahead.
make
Who do
sure
you
you're
think
making
you
it
are,
rain for
Neo?
easy. Make sure you're making it rain for easy. We got to raise his tax bracket in the spirit of the debate.
Yeah.
True.
Well, he's in Canada. I don't even know how that works.
Yeah, that's it. That's the double-edged sword there. On the one hand, you're funding easy. On the other hand, you're indirectly funding Trudeau.
And YouTube. And Google. I don't think. I mean, I've been asking a whole bunch of questions. I did want to mention that Ulysses S. Grant. So, the Tariff Act in 1894 is when churches officially got their tax exemption, but they always had it since the founding of the country. And its origins was Constantinian. That's when they started saying churches shouldn't have to pay taxes. But Ulysses S. Grant got a 900-foot petition with 35,000 signatures on it saying churches should pay their taxes.
Well, the problem is that the mentality of that the churches should not pay taxes is so the church's existence is not beholden to the government from a financial standpoint. Look at how the government can use the IRS in America to arbitrarily crush anyone that they want, whether it's you, me, or a company. They want to target us, they can target us. We both agree there. Okay, so part of that problem is that the tax code is so complicated and convoluted that it's basically impossible for any particular person to stand up and say, I am innocent, I have committed no tax law infractions. You can, in most cases, people, even the most honest of people, would only be able to say, to the best of my knowledge, because they don't know the like triple phone book length tax code that we have. Now, now you can simplify the tax code and still let churches remain tax exempt from the government. You want churches to be more politically active. I don't necessarily disagree on that. We can repeal the Johnson Act that governs that, but still keep churches tax exempt. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive.
But I just don't see. So I feel like when you mentioned the IRS, when a church is 501c3 tax exempt, then now we're beholden to following the rules of.
That's why I say we don't have
to keep good with the IRS.
That's why I say we don't have to take away blanket tax exemption for churches. We could just repeal the Johnson Act and that problem's over.
Okay. I didn't look into the Johnson Act, so I don't know.
The Johnson Act is specifically what relegates churches to nonpartisan political activism.
Okay.
So that's where it's saying you can distribute literature on issues, you can host debates, you can host forums, you can host voter drives, you can do XYZ. You just cannot explicitly endorse a particular candidate or campaign. But churches can speak about abortion all day long, and it's not a violation of the Johnson Act because opposition to abortion is a cornerstone of Christian doctrine.
Have you heard of Pastor Greg Locke?
Name is not familiar.
He's kind of a mega church guy, and he came out.
Probably why I haven't heard of him.
Well, not a super mega church, and he's blew up kind of quick. But he went out. He was basically coming on fire, under fire, because during the coup and stuff like that, he was against all those mandates. And he came out on stage and he said, if you're a Democrat, if you support abortion, if you're wearing a mask in my church, then get out. I don't want you here. You cannot be Christian and vote Democrat in America. And so everybody, the Young Turks, Pac-Man, all of these liberal people started coming after Greg Locke, saying he needs to lose his tax-exempt status. And so at his next service, he came out and said, I went down and got a lawyer and went down to the IRS building, and I got rid of my 501c3 status. So he's got a mega church that is not tax-exempt.
But he didn't have to. That's the thing. What he's specifically saying, he wasn't endorsing a candidate. He wasn't endorsing a party. He wasn't endorsing a campaign. All he did was point out that if you fit X, Y, and Z, your theology, you are incorrect and you are incompatible with Christianity. He's just pointing that out. There's no partisan statement there. He's referring to church doctrine, and that's completely acceptable. But what he did in that case was because he heard the public backlash, he caved in because he got afraid. He tried to turn around and clearly make it sound like it was this brave, bold statement that I'm now paying taxes. I don't know what's so brave about paying taxes in that case, but I don't know how he thinks that was a win.
It sounded based to me because...
Yes, I'm handing the government more money, real based. No, I don't buy that.
No, because you could still not pay a bunch of taxes. You just have to show that you're putting out more than what you're bringing in. You have to be transparent. It's a form.
I still think responding to out of fear to some morons who have probably never opened the tax code in their entire lives, like Cenk Uygur. Is not, and saying I'm now giving the government income tax for the church is not the win he thinks it is.
If he can go up on stage and say, this is our guy, we all need to vote for this guy, and not be afraid to say that anymore at threat of losing his tax exempt status, I think that's pretty based.
Again, people you can still hold debates, you can still hold open forums, and you can still be giving the messaging that, look, if you have if the congregation is following correct theology and they know the doctrines, then that's going to be informing who they should be voting for, and they're going to have a good idea without being explicitly told, like, hey, you should be voting for this guy over this woman. You know, there's ways to work within the framework without having to say the quiet part out loud. Other than that, this doesn't have to be a one-fits-all solution. We could keep tax exemption and mobilize politically behind repealing the Johnson Act. We can do both.
Okay. So that's a compromise. If that would work, then that's a compromise I could go with.
Yes, because the problem is like, and you've gotten into this somewhat where we've moved around a bit. There are a lot of issues that can, be tangled into this, but if you can unravel them one at a time, you can treat the church tax exemption with mutual exclusivity from everything else and address those other issues on a one-to-one basis. You don't have to say, okay, I'm going to, for the purpose of taking this big knot apart, I'm going to cut this one particular string, risk doing a lot more harm than I may do good, when I could actually be like, maybe there is another way we can address the activism issue, which I wouldn't be opposed to. I would not be opposed to it at all. But the solution to that would really be repealing the Johnson Act, because that's what put it in place, not the tax exempt standard on its own. Prior to the Johnson Act, churches could be partisan politically. They had every right to be. It was Johnson we have to thank for that, just like we have Johnson to thank for affirmative action. No wonder that he came up with those two things.
Okay, good point. I don't like the 501c3 tax exempt status, period. BLM is 501c3. Planned Parenthood is 501c3. The Satanic Temple is 501c3. The Mormon Church is 501c3. They have temples everywhere. In every neighborhood, they have temples, and they don't have to pay taxes. And they say they do a lot for charity, but you have gold-plated pews in your temples. How much of that money is really going over to save the starving pygmies in Africa or whatever they say they're doing?
And there's an issue there where what you can do is we can also, in that respect, we can tighten the framework around what qualifies as not just as qualifying for the 501c3 status, but for what actually satisfies the test for being recognized as a religion by the government at all.
Yeah.
Again, that's something you can do independent of churches being tax exempt.
Or a charitable organization. You could just say you're helping the community. Who defines what helping is? I don't think Planned Parenthood is helping anybody.
No, I don't think anyone, I agree, and I don't think anyone watching this would disagree that Planned Parenthood helps next to nobody. A lot of charities have very poor ratios anyway. At one point, I've been told the Wounded Warrior spends maybe 10 cents on every dollar towards actually helping veterans.
Right.
Charities have ratios, and this is why the financial transparency is important, so that people can see them. Because the way a lot of those ratios work is like you could have a 90-10, 80-20, 70-30. Those are horrible ratios for a charity to operate on. Mm-hmm. That means the larger number is always going towards operating costs, advertising, fundraising costs, getting the message out, and the smaller number is always what's going back into the actual cause. It's not just, and you can add Susan G. Komen to that. You can add a shit ton of charities.
Yeah. How are all these nonprofit people rich? They start a nonprofit and then they're rich. It's like, if it's nonprofit, how did you get rich off of it?
In a lot of those cases, I would not be shocked if those people are actually having their living expenses subsidized under operating costs for the organization because they make so much money.
But churches could do the same things.
And that would involve tightening the actual tax laws. You don't have to hose the church exemption down to clean up everything else.
All right.
That's why I say there are numerous other viable solutions that you can untangle from this knot that would effectively address most grievances with the concept of church tax exemption. Because, like I said, we could also tighten the guidelines of what qualifies as a religion. It's already very vague, and it's made even more vague by the fact that the Supreme Court ruled that this is not intended to be either definitive or all-encompassing. So anybody who wants to come up with their own bullshit religion can play within that framework, make an effective argument, and say, look, I'm now a religion and I'm going to try to get all my extra benefits for it. That being said, it's not as simple as like me saying, oh, I went down to City Hall and got my condo zoned as a chapel. You can't just do that. That's probably one of the only things you can't do, the way the government laws tend to function. But again, that's why I say if you can isolate the church tax exemption issue on its own, and a lot of these other grievances can be addressed separately in other ways. We don't have to take this approach of, I'm going to cut across my left eye to spite my whole face.
Okay. Well, I've been asking you questions the whole time. You got any questions for me?
I've been responding to you making the case, and I think it's, as far as some of the particulars on what we'd like to see, I think we do agree on that, but I just would not agree that getting the getting rid of tax exemption is going to be the most effective and direct solution that gets us there by any means.
No, my biggest thing is it's just a step in the right direction. And then once the churches have to start paying taxes, the people don't get their write-offs anymore. And now the church says, well, if we're giving all this money to the government, we need to get active, and we need to start not just saying, let's vote for this candidate, but installing people into the government, saying we're going to run this guy and we're all going to get behind this guy.
Now but that's also assuming what a lot of those churches, particularly the Protestant churches and mega churches, would be doing at that point would be advocating for good. And I don't believe a lot of those churches would be. They'd be expanding lobbying efforts. Fuck yes, they would. But they're going to expand those lobbying efforts to save money. They're not going to be expanding those lobbying efforts to push a correct agenda that benefits you or me.
Not if the church body is holding their feet to the flames.
What ultimately a lot of those Protestant churches and non-denominational churches, evangelicals, mega churches, everything.
I don't think all those would have popped up if we didn't have this.
All of those,
benefit.
Most of those have no governing authority. They're not going to be told, hey, if you do this, you're not a Christian church anymore and you're getting shut down and excommunicated. A lot of the people in charge of those churches answer to nobody but themselves. And some of those hustlers probably don't even think they answer to God.
Yeah, but those hustlers wouldn't have been incentivized to start those churches if it wasn't for some of these tax laws.
But the solution to that is not to then say every other proper Christian church gets punished for their mistake. It doesn't help anybody else by that. It just creates more problems. That's why I say now you could say, yeah, okay, all of this might happen if we repealed tax exemption. Might be very efficient way to do it, but wouldn't it be more effective if we kept the tax exemption and just repealed the Johnson Act?
If that would work in the same way and be an effective way to do it, then...
If we repealed the Johnson Act tomorrow, churches could be endorsing Trump on Monday.
Okay. Well, there's a compromise then.
That would be the most effective. And because then it's like, what do you then have? You got churches endorsing Trump, and you got those churches not giving the federal government more fucking money. Win-win.
When's this going to turn into a roast battle? Don't you have some World of Warcraft to play right now or something?
No, World of Warcraft doesn't come out with the new expansion till the end of August. I've been playing Final Fantasy 14 this week.
Nice. I play Final Fantasy 14 too.
If you're single, you might be able to find a Mormon church that, may give you a couple of blondes just for signing up. Not that I advocate for Mormonism by any means, but if you're lonely, it might work out for you.
I say that all the time. I say, well, I am married, but I say all the time, if I was single, I would just go to Utah and become Mormon. You'll get a wife real quick. She's not going to be loyal, but...
Yeah, my problems with Mormonism are completely separate from this, but they do make for a lot of great jokes.
Yeah. But they're tax exempt.
Well, those temple undergarments aren't cheap, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, we got like 2 minutes left here. It looks like, do you guys have any other points that you wanted to talk on? I did ask the chat if they wanted to extend 20 minutes. They are about half and half.
I feel like we came to a really strong finish there, right about time, landing the plane. Unless you've got anything else.
I was gonna say, unless you guys have anything else, any other points that you guys wanted that you thought the other was wrong about.
I would just get into some biblical stuff. I would just go to Matthew 22 and Romans 13, but I'll save Romans 13 for my closing.
Yeah, my main objection is that I think, as we were covering there, I believe you can come up with other viable solutions. And when I saw how the Johnson Act impacted tax exemption, to me, that is by far the better solution. Is just strip that damn thing out of the law, and we win on both fronts. We're not giving the money we're giving to churches stays with the churches, and we can also have based priests that endorse Trump.
Yeah, I didn't look into the Johnson Act. I did look into a lot of Supreme Court cases that relates to this, and like Loving versus Virginia, Obergefell versus Hodges, and that's when they started making rules about marriage. But you had a good answer to that marriage isn't necessarily in America looked at as a church specific thing, but those decisions could eventually affect the churches. But Waltz versus the Tax Commission of New York, he was basically complaining that the churches don't have to pay taxes on all this land, and all of us taxpayers around them are paying for their land. And they build these huge, gaudy churches with parishioners, whatever this called, the places where people come and live. And
well, that's the thing, is that in the case of a lot of like, and this is where it like gets really murky, and it's not optically good at all when you're speaking about taxes in relations to monasteries and convents, because in a lot of those cases, like, those are people who, like in the case of monasteries, those are either people who are devoting their life to religious study, which would not only be
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but it looks like the chat is leaning more towards they do want the 20 minutes, and it seems like you guys have a little more time.
Yeah,
do you guys want the 20 minutes more?
Yeah, we lit this back up unintentionally, so let's go.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. Let it back up. You know, okay, we'll go another 20 minutes. Let's go.
And
I'm kind of easy. This is the most you've had to do in an hour.
I'm kind of conspiracy brained. And
let me go back to this. Let me carry on this. So in the case of monasteries, those are either those are men who have decided to devote their lives to religious study. Those are retired priests or retired pastors in some cases that are also then devoting their life to religious study, which would again actually under charity would not only be religious, that would be an educational aspect that's also governed under 501c3. And in some cases, you're giving these retired priests a place to live. And then in some of those instances, and this is the case with Catholics, definitely, because I went to Catholic school for 12 years. But we had retired priests who lived at a monastery, but they came to the schools to teach. So they're still serving the community while being provided a place to live after retirement by the church. Same thing with convents. Like, I was taught by several retired nuns who lived at the convent right across the street from my elementary school. They lived there. That was provided for them, and they were coming, and then they would come teach at the school. But they're not actually, they're not out on missionary work or anything of that nature. They're basically retired from their duties, and they're teaching classes here and there in their retirement. So that's where it's like, yeah, you're not only at that point talking about bringing religion into it, but you're bringing education. So at that point, it's like, in many ways, just on that subject alone, it's kind of hard to also untangle religion from education when it comes to topics that are governed under 501c3. I mean, it's hard to even say that people getting instruction in spirituality and in theology is not just religious in nature, but also educational for them in nature.
Yeah. But in the same way that the Catholic Church could do that, the Satanic Temple could do the same thing and start teaching kids, and all of that would be tax exempt. So, yeah, you're right. It comes back to, we have to determine what makes something 501c3 worthy, but all they have to do is say, we're helping the community. And I don't consider some of those things help.
And that is something that can be addressed by tightening the legal framework to the point that we're excluding organizations like the Satanic Temple. But
how would you do that? How would you do that and be equal and fair and respect the First Amendment and all that?
I would have to look through the framework and find every single way that we could rule out the Satanic Temple and say, here are the 5, 6, 7, 8 things we're going to tighten up in these guidelines that are going to ultimately exclude a lot of bad faith actors from claiming that they're a religion and that they're helping people when they're actually not.
Or like Waco, or like Joseph Smith. One of his, other than the incentive of having multiple wives, one of the big incentives was not having to pay taxes. And we can all travel together and take in money, not pay taxes on it.
The incentive, having multiple wives, was not always an incentive. When Brigham Young was informed of the plurality doctrine, he publicly prayed to die.
I think he had multiple wives.
He did, but he didn't wanna. When he was told you got to do this, his reaction was, "Please God, kill me."
Yeah, they got a lot of weird stuff that.
Yeah, so like,
should not
say
be-
what you will about Mormons and Brigham Young, but he knew women were trouble, especially in groups.
Well, it's not just, I just keep going at the Mormons because I live in Salt Lake City and I see it
Yeah.
a lot. But same thing with Waco. You know, they have this big compound and it's considered a church. It's got a school in it. It's educating. And I don't think, you know, Waco, they were doing a lot of weird stuff. I don't think they deserve to be burned alive. But
Yeah, no. That again, that's where government authority came in and overacted and overreached more than it ever should have been able to, deciding to use firepower over judgment.
but that was the ATF. The IRS was fine with it.
Well, yeah, because there wasn't any evidence they were cheating on their taxes.
Because they didn't have to do taxes. They were exempt.
Yeah, but you don't think ultimately the IRS relies on other government organizations for enforcement. Do you think they're gonna send a little nerd with a pocket protector and thick-rimmed glasses and a briefcase to tell you haven't paid your taxes in X amount of years and we're gonna do something about it? No, they're gonna send 10 guys with guns.
Yeah.
Look at Wesley Snipes. Like, they have enforcement under the IRS. Like, they will kick your door in. They will put a rifle to your head for not paying your taxes.
What does Wesley Snipes have to do with it? You look like you
He
trying to
was
look
tax
like Blade.
evasion for years. He was like years and years of tax evasion.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he had also like not made a good movie since Blade, so he was also into like years and years of success evasion, probably why he wasn't paying his taxes in the first place.
Yeah. If you got a trench coat, you could be like a Neo or a Blade.
I do, actually. I have a trench coat that's been with me since I was 14 years old. My grandmother bought it for me back when the Crow version of Sting was a big thing in WCW back in the 90s.
So what about Matthew 22, where they asked him, should we pay taxes? He said, show me the denarius, whose face is on it. Caesar, render to Caesar what is Caesar's.
He's speaking to a person, asking him a direct question before the church was established. So there's...
But that was his church. That was, how many were gathered there?
I'm not
more than one?
sure how many were gathered there, but again, a person is asking him, should I pay taxes? He's not
well,
going to...
church is wherever 2 or more are gathered in my name. And him
Well,
and his
also,
disciples
you're
are
in a-
together. That's the body of Christ. That is the church.
Also, you are also in Roman-occupied Jerusalem, where making such a statement as to not pay taxes would have been sedition to the Roman Empire, and Jesus would have been arrested a lot sooner than he was.
So Jesus was scared, so he just said what he had to say.
No, I'm saying he gave an answer where he's saying, because ultimately he's also saying, render unto God what is God's, not just render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. He's making a different statement, but it's being phrased in such a way that the Romans could not say he's advocating for sedition against the empire.
And Matthew was a tax
because
collector.
that's ultimately what he was. That is ultimately what the Romans chose as a criminal charge to crucify Jesus under, was sedition.
Yeah, but I don't think Jesus would have changed how he spoke because he was afraid of anything.
No, I'm not saying he would. either, but I'm saying specifically that if he had said anything different, it would have been considered sedition to the Roman Empire. That's
And I
just
also don't think he was just talking to one person. I think he was talking to everybody throughout the history of the world who read that, which is the church.
But when he's saying to any group of people, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God, he's speaking to people. He is not directly, at no point is he saying the church be beholden to the government. At no point is he saying the church contribute to the wealth of the government.
I think he's saying if the government says pay your taxes, that the George Franklin or the Benji that you have in your wallet, if you got to pay a percent of that to the government to have your church here, you pay it.
Well, you have to function within the land that the church is on. Obviously, that's how it is in any country. But the standard that has been, the long-standing standard has been that churches should not have to pay taxes so that they don't have a financial relationship with the government.
Yeah,
and that's why I say when you have that financial relationship, it can make things more dangerous. That's why I say you're giving more power at that point to the IRS to be used against churches selectively.
That's since Constantine, which was 300 years later. But in Jesus's time, the churches would have had to pay taxes.
Well, did the church? A lot of those
Paul was a tax collector. Matthew was a tax collector. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and
then they
Jesus hung out with them, and people hated him for hanging out with them.
Yes, until they quit being tax collectors because they all said it was wrong.
I don't know if they said it was wrong. They just decided to follow
Jesus was not necessarily pro-tax collector or pro-taxes. When he saw tax collectors and money changers in the temple, he called it a den of vipers, as I put in my opening statement.
Yeah.
So that's why I would hearken back to say, yes, giving the government expanded tax authority over the churches is no different than, inviting the den of vipers back into the temples. But this time we're doing it right through the front fucking door.
Well, they're not going to be hanging out in the church. It's just the government.
No, but in all senses, you have essentially just opened the front door and let them in with that authority at that point.
But then we get to elect the right Caesar.
And again, we can do that without giving up tax exemption to the state by repealing the Johnson Act. We can have both.
Yeah. I'll have to look into that, but that sounds like a good compromise. That sounds like if that's a way that we can make it work, then yeah.
Yeah, because when I was looking it up, it's like that was what codified it into law, was that churches must remain nonpartisan. And that was signed in the Johnson Act. So at that point, essentially all we got to do, we got to strip that out, scrub that out of the law, and then we can have it both ways effectively at that point. We're not financially beholden to the government, and we can be influential upon the government openly.
Okay. That's a good compromise. I'm trying to see if I have anything else in my notes. I think I covered everything I wanted to mention. Yep.
Let's see.
You got 9 minutes left on the 20 minutes extension. If you guys have nothing, we can go into closing.
I mean, we can spend 9 minutes doing closing statements.
Yeah, realistically, we could.
I know we got into the whole actual taxes portion of that by the numbers very little, but would you agree though that it's there's that any notion that this would somehow lead to a financial windfall for you, me, everybody else in the country is delusional at best?
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to reverse the national debt or anything like that.
Yeah, and it certainly wouldn't be applied in such a way that there would actually, because that would be on the assumption that they said, hey, we're going to repeal church tax exemption, and tied directly to it. That's the only way this would ever get done in any kind of good faith, if the actual money and numbers were there, which they're not. But if it actually, as part of that repeal, if it actually said, and we are going to write down, individual income tax amounts with this money, like it's going to be earmarked specifically for this, it's going to pay down individual taxes. That's the only way it happens, and it would never happen that way. The government would never decide to be benevolent with a financial windfall for them instead of giving it to us. So it's
But some countries have done this where if you show that you're a member of a church and you're paying taxes to that, or you pay a tax to that church, it reduces your total taxes. So now instead of having to tithe and pay your full taxes, if we get Christian leadership through the church is working with government, then we say, if you're part of this church and you're paying your taxes, you pay a tax to the church, that church uses that counts as tithing, and you get a reduction in your taxes.
And any government taking that approach is just highlighting that they are more trustworthy than this government when it comes to taxes, which is exactly why I wouldn't trust the government with being offered more money.
Right. That's why I said it would be harsh at first. It would be, because with our current system, it would be a mess. But once that started happening, if we mobilized, we all united and said, we got to fix this government as Christians, then we could make a big change to the country.
Well, yes, things that have the potential to be the most efficient can also be the most painful. Look at Argentina. But
yeah. And even my people were like, this is radical, it's never going to happen. And I'm like, that's the way every major event in the world happened, is you got to, and it's not even a huge step. It's a small step that people might not like, but it could make a big change.
But there is a balance to be struck there of efficiency and effectiveness, and that's why I say when I'm actually looking into this and I'm encountering that, it's like, because I looked into it, it's like, to what extent can churches be politically active? And everything was saying, no, this is all tied basically to the Johnson Act. So I said, oh, then this is easy. We can keep tax exemption. Just kill the Johnson Act.
Okay. Yeah.
We can get that out of power the same way Johnson got into power, with a magic bullet.
Yeah, if we can't be partisan and we can't support candidates as a church, then just talking about issues doesn't matter, because if we don't vote and the people are saying, I don't get involved in politics, I'm a Christian. I hear that so much. I hear so many Christians who say, I don't vote, I don't get involved in politics, and I don't like that.
And I think a lot of that isn't necessarily tied to any one specific thing. There's a lot of reasons for voter apathy in different states. Like, my brother lived in Massachusetts, and he's a libertarian, and he would be the first one to tell you his vote in Massachusetts didn't matter.
Well, everybody thinks if everybody says my vote doesn't matter, so they don't vote.
But when you're in a thorough, blue state that goes overwhelmingly Democrat in every national election, no, his vote for president in Massachusetts does not matter for the purpose of shifting Massachusetts electoral votes.
Right. Well, and it's I live in Utah. I don't really need to show up to vote for Trump in Utah.
Yeah, you're in a thorough red state. Your vote's going to carry. That vote's going to carry no matter what. Barring any unforeseen act of God, your state's going red. I know. Same thing, but then it's like, no, if you go in, you don't see the same amount of apathy when with people in battleground states, because they know their vote absolutely does matter. They're showing up. Could be,
but over time,
a handful of people showing up or not could be a big shift in a district and influence the state election.
Over time, if more people like you and I and Christians keep thinking that, keep saying that, and more and more of them keep saying that. Meanwhile, all the college liberal kids, the Antifas, and the kids that show up
don't vote. They generally don't? A lot of them don't vote. That's why Bernie Sanders lost 2 primary elections, because his college support base didn't actually turn out and vote for him. Most college kids love to be politically active between 18 and 22,
but they
don't
vote.
actually think voting is important until they have this magical thing show up in their life called bills. Then all of a sudden they have an opinion on how government policy should spend money. That tends to be how that goes.
Okay. I just kind of figured if they can show up to all these protests all the time and they can mobilize and organize so well with
I've seen several, you have there were a lot of internal blame in Democrat circles amongst how did Bernie not get nominated? Well, was it all, did it come down to, some
Hillary did some, yeah.
Is that part of it? Certainly. But the other big part of it was that he overwhelmingly appealed to a voter base that doesn't think it's important to vote when they're 19 years old.
Yeah, but if they're doing mail-in ballots and then they're going around knocking doors and collecting
most
ballots,
college kids are still too lazy to be fucked to even get an absentee ballot.
No,
especially because if you go to college in a different state,
you don't have to do an absentee ballot anymore. Since 2020, it just shows up at your door, and then the Democrats mobilize, and we can talk about this because this is legal, but they ballot harvest. They go door to door and they collect them. So if we had the church doing that, then we could do the same thing.
And again, we repeal the Johnson Act. We can do that tomorrow and still not give the government billions of dollars.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Pretty good timing. We had a few seconds left on the 20-minute extension there. So very good timing. So yeah, we can get into your closings. Since started with, so the way we were going to end it is with Urban going first here on his closing, right? And then Wally.
Yeah.
However we want to go about it, it's fine with me.
All right. I don't have much of a planned closing.
I didn't either, so we're on equal footing.
Yep.
I don't ever plan my closing. I just do a closing based off of the debate, but
yeah. So
yeah, how can you really?
Basically, I don't know. I don't think you addressed a lot of my points very well that I made in my opening. I felt like I was more just kind of leading the debate by asking a lot of questions, and you were just reacting. But that's all right. I just thank you, Easy, for doing this and for having us on, and it was cool. And thank you, Wally, for challenging me because, like I said, this was a topic in the, what was it called? The verbal combat.
Yes, you missed out on it, I believe. That's why when Easy was talking with you, I said, "Hey, let's run this back."
Yeah, I missed it, and I said I would have given some pushback on that. And then Wally challenged me to a debate, and I'm like, well, man, I could have talked about this for 5 minutes. I don't know if I could talk about this for an hour, but I don't know a whole lot about it. But he challenged me, and it gets me writing. It gets me organizing my thoughts and figuring out why I think the way that I think, and gets me researching. When I was researching, I started seeing that the side I'm taking, a lot of Democrats take, a lot of atheists take, because I guess the idea is that this would destroy the church, and they hate the church, so they want to do it. And so I had to try to come at it from a different angle and make it a based angle where I don't want to destroy the church, but I want to strengthen the church and get us more involved in the government. I do want to do a little Bible thumping at the end here. Romans 13:1-2. Let every person be subject to the government authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. And then I'm going to skip to verse 5 and 6. Therefore, one must be subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. So I don't always have to debate and bring Christianity into it, but I am a Christian, and I find it hard to divorce my political ideas from my religious ideas. Everything I believe politically is because of my Christian foundation. So, and since we're talking about churches and tax exemption, I figured it would be appropriate to do a little Bible thumping in there. But the last part that I wrote, I think we already talked about. Matthew was a tax collector, Zacchaeus, Paul, and they weren't just talking to individuals; they were talking to the whole body of Christ. Everyone who ever read that verse. Currently, religious freedom is not working in this country. The separation of church and state is not working. Was it John Adams who said the Constitution is for a moral and religious people? And I think he was the most based one out of all of them. And when he was talking about religious people, he was talking about Christians. He wasn't talking about Scientologists and atheists and all this other stuff. So that's all I got to say. But thank you guys. It was awesome. I had fun.
Right,
Okay.
Wally.
So, ultimately, we came into this on whether or not churches should remain tax exempt. And regardless of the reasons for and against it, the answer is still overwhelmingly yes. And that is because ultimately, for any justification that could be made that where we should remove tax exemption and have churches hand money to the government that it doesn't need nor deserve is tied to the Johnson Act, which I will now read from. The Johnson Amendment in 1954 provides that by definition, organizations do not participate in or intervene in, including the publishing or distributing of statements, any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for public office. So right there, we don't need to give up tax exemption and hand the government money for churches to have higher political engagement or worry about political speech being policed by the government. We can just kill the Johnson Amendment. So add that to the list right up there with repeal the 19th. Kill the Johnson Amendment with fire, if preferable, and axes, because that's my thing. Kill the Johnson Amendment with axes and fire, and we can keep our money from the government too. And then just to wrap that up, JS, this was fun. Thank you very much for the debate. It's been great for me to get back into a proper long-form 1v1. Haven't done this for a couple of years right now. Got back into doing the verbal combat panels to get my feet wet, and this is fun. And anyone who enjoys me in a 1v1, I want to plug my debate with Teriak coming up on the 13th, where the audience is going to get an hour to vote on the topics.
You're going to do like multiple topics?
Yep, we're starting with gun control, then we're going to do a back and forth, bringing our own topics. And then it's going to be an hour with the audience. Easy's going to put up polls. The audience will vote. We'll keep changing the topics based on the polls. So it's going to be completely random at that point for both of us.
Right. And I just want to say again, thank you both. You've done really good. I really didn't have to do any moderation. I thought I was going to have to do more, but that was really good. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to read through the super chats that we got during the debate. And I'm also going to drop the StreamYard link so that after we can let people come up one by one and address anything they wanted to address. Because I know I've already seen 2 people say they want to come up. So,
okay. Can I take a restroom break before we do the audience stuff?
Yeah, you know what? Go take a restroom break even before I read the super chats. Go ahead.
Cool.
So that you can be here in case there's any for you to respond to.
I'm going to go get a drink.
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to say to the chat, make sure you put some crowns in the chat for chat, okay? Because you guys have been amazing. Absolutely. Thank you all for your contributions to helping this shit stay alive. I'm just getting this camera for the fourth person to come up. Here we go. Get that ready, because I actually didn't do that part yet for the layout. This debate layout is newer. Fix this, but yeah, I just want to wait till they're back here so I can read the super chats. Well, there's some I know I can read before they get back there. The first one here was Jade with $10 super chat. Let's go. That's what's up. There we go. Just coming back just in time. So the first super chat was Jade with the $10. Let's go. Thank you, Jade. Xavier, member for 2 months. Swang and bang. Let's see some blood. I think a lot of people, especially with Wally. Wally's, Wally
That's
usually
what I was expecting.
Swang and bang. I'm gonna start using that. That is brilliant.
brings the axes out, right? Swang and bang. Jade with a gifted membership. Thank you so much, Jade. I appreciate you. Shazzy Bear with the £10 super chat. Good morning, sort of. Might fall asleep. It's 2:16 a.m. Love you, Bears. Love you too, Shazzy. You're amazing. The Vengeful Truther with the gifted membership. Appreciate you. See, a lot of these are not even addressing, they're just support, and I love you guys. You guys are absolutely amazing. Look at Evan coming in with 2 just to make it 25. Evan doesn't like those odd numbers. Wouldn't modesty mean more than money motivated? Jade for $2. I'm not sure who she was addressing here.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to go with that.
Do any of you have
Wouldn't modesty be more than money motivated?
Well, I think
the idea is if that's to mean that would be that churches would have to function with more financial modesty. In some cases they might, but in a lot of cases, like those larger churches are just going to look to make up those losses. Like if you start, because this is something where it's like, if you suddenly have to hand over X% of what's coming in because it's all now considered taxable income, bigger churches are not just going to eat that loss. They're going to look to come up with that money from somewhere. This would be the same logic with, people raising the minimum wage or companies that have to pay X amount of union benefits or a union mandated wage. The companies don't eat that loss. It bleeds down somewhere. So the bigger churches, especially your non-denominational and evangelical ones, would definitely be shaking down parishioners for more money, and they wouldn't be shy about it, in my guess.
All right. $2 from Evan, another 3 to make it 30, just evening up the numbers. Crazy Zark for $5. The Johnson Amendment is so they can keep the tax exemption. So bringing up the Johnson Amendment. Thank you, Crazy
So if they got rid of the Johnson Amendment, then they would lose
the Johnson
tax
Amendment is what would
revoke
their tax exemption if churches became politically partisan. That it's literally it is the carrot on the stick there. So if you remove the tax exemption, if you remove the Johnson Amendment, which has been in place since '54, prior to that, churches could be partisan and there was no recourse against it. So really, this is what's providing the legal leverage that a church could have its tax exemption taken away. You strip it, then, like I said, no more taxes, no extra tax money for the government, and Trump endorsements from the churches for all.
But if the 501c3 still has a clause that says you can't talk about politics and you get rid of the Johnson Amendment.
You get rid of the Johnson Amendment and the churches are free to be politically partisan all day long.
I'd have to, I don't know. I don't know enough about this Johnson Amendment.
All right. Thank you.
That's right. Everybody spend the rest of the night looking up your Johnson.
Is the solution to the problems you both agree on not on 501c, but in creating a decentralized form of economy that allows not to render unto Caesar?
That's a Christian anarchist question there. he wa- he's saying no government essentially, so there is no Caesar. If the,
That's
You
what
guys
if
have anything you want
I
to
would
say?
agree with that if the church became Caesar. If the church is the government,
yes, and if we get rid of it, and if we chop off the government's Johnson, we can become Caesar.
but that's still a hierarchy. That's still an authoritarian, a more authoritarian,
Right.
authority-based
Yeah,
system.
my problems with the anarchist concept, especially marrying it to Christianity, is another 2 hours. So I'll put a bookmark in my potential disagreements with John, and we'll save those for another time.
All right. So for $5, and again, thank you, John. For $5 from Crazy Zark, churches should pay taxes and talk about politics. Christians should never walk on eggshells to save a buck.
Yeah.
And then I found a way we can have both. Isn't life great?
Thank you, Crazy Zark. ZT Dan became a new member. I seen she renewed her membership. Thank you. Thank you. We got Robert Demita for $10. Happy 4th, everyone. I feel like I'm in Vietnam with all the fireworks going off outside my house. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate you and happy 4th. John with a $10 super chat. So why is making the church forced to go into politics and governance out of need of economic benefit create a good moral Christian state? Doesn't this refuse your reasoning, JS?
They're not forced to go into politics. They're just allowed to if we get rid of the 501c3. Currently, they're not allowed to if they want to keep that benefit.
All right. Thank you, John. And John with another $10 super chat. Wally, if 501c is a shield against the government, why should we reform or reframe 501c? Wouldn't Josh's point of removing 501c be more fair and efficient instead of adding more regulations?
Thankfully, we can still keep 501c3 and just get rid of the speech restriction. I can die on that hill now all night long.
That was his strongest point because I was like, okay, that's a compromise, yeah. So he's gonna stand on that one.
He's standing on it. Okay, all right. Well, thank
Nothing
you,
wrong with that
John.
either.
Crazy Zark with a $5 super chat. Wally should look at the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. Jesus never looked down on a tax collecting. He looked down on sinners. You have anything to say to that?
I believe a good deal of the tax collectors he spoke to were also sinning, at least to some degree, especially when he said he had been cheating people when he collected their taxes. And part of his repentance was to make right to the people that he cheated. So yes, they were tax collectors and they were also sinners. That's completely fair. He didn't have to look down on tax. He wouldn't. What it's saying is just pointing out is that he wouldn't look down on ethical tax collectors, and that's also completely a fair point. I wouldn't disagree with that at all.
All right. Thank you, Crazy Zark. And Crazy Zark with another $5 super chat says, John, he ate with the tax collector. John, he ate with tax collectors. Jesus didn't have a problem with their job.
Yeah.
I guess that was going back to you there again, Wally.
Unless he's referring to John in the chat said something, maybe, but yeah, I don't
know
why he said
okay.
John. I don't know why he said
maybe
John.
that.
Yeah, I would still be saying the same thing. So there we go.
All right. Well, thank you all for the super chats. I appreciate you. Some good comments and questions there. I did drop the StreamYard link a couple times. I'll drop it again here for anyone that wants to come up, ask questions, or give any pushback. And we do have someone in the back here.
I'm going to grab it out of your chat and put it into my chat.
Hello.
Hey, Adam. All right, yeah. Here, I'll put it in the back here for you if you want, in the back chat. Or you could just copy and paste the tab, right? Copy and paste the StreamYard link from the tab.
Okay, so I got 2 points I wanted to make towards JS here. I basically agree with Wally on this, but I'm gonna just ask. This is a pretty quick string of questions based on shit you've said in the debate. So JS, do you think that churches should care more or less about money and financials?
Less.
Okay, so if they have to pay more into taxes, will they be caring more or less about their financial situation?
I think the same, because they're just going to pay a percentage of what they take in.
Okay, so do you think that let's say you have two cases, okay? One in which a portion of the money is going to the government and they're not able to use it for their own stuff. And the other case, they're able to use that money for their own projects. In which situation are they more strapped for cash?
The first situation, they're going to be more strapped for cash.
Yes, necessarily. So they're going to be caring more about money if they have to pay more in taxes.
Right, but they're not going to be beholden to the government anymore, and they're going to be able to take over and then make sure that their tax money is going to the right causes, which benefits them in the long run.
No, they are still beholden to the government. In fact, they're more beholden to the government because if they're not able to come up with that money for taxes, they'll get shut down.
And then they can go have church in a field and just, like I said, collect money in a hat and not even have the government be involved in it, which I think would be a better system anyway.
So that's obviously not a better system, because having a physical building where people can congregate as opposed to a house church or just being in like a forest somewhere has distinct positive benefits. And I can point out a number of them. First of all,
stay out of the rain. Is that?
So it offers a large degree of legitimacy towards the organization. That's important. They want to evangelize. They want to get more people through the door. You're going to get fewer people through the door if you don't have any fucking doors. Your people are going to take you less seriously if you don't have a building, and you look less official. Additionally,
the Jews had doors and Jesus didn't have doors. And how's Christianity doing compared to Judaism today?
So currently Christianity is doing significantly better than Judaism because it got an official established group that had an official hierarchical group in Western Europe. It was the Catholic and Orthodox churches at different time periods that were able to set up buildings and be official. So you're appealing to the very beginning of Christianity before it blew up. Obviously, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church were responsible for spreading Christianity. And when did they do the most work? I'll tell you when. It's when they had an established hierarchy and they had buildings. They looked more official. They were able to do this shit more effectively.
That's also when it started dividing up, and now we have 35,000 denominations. They all got doors, but we can't agree on anything.
Yeah, so whether or not they agree or not is immaterial to whether or not these groups look more or less official. But also, the other thing I want to point out, I have no idea how the verse about Jesus and the talking about the denarius is relevant to this at all. Do you think Jesus was making a statement about 501c3 status?
It's a direct reference to taxes. They asked him, should we pay our taxes? That's the body of Christ asking Christ, should we pay our taxes? And he said yes.
Yeah,
That's
so
how
that
it's
wasn't
relevant.
the body of Christ. That was the Pharisees offering him a question. But that's secondary to the point.
That was
the point
his
I'm
church.
making.
He was holding church. Whenever Jesus
So
was talking to a group of people,
the point
that's
I'm
church.
making here. So the point I'm making here is very specific. Is it your claim that he was making a statement about 501c3 status in that verse?
He was making a claim about taxes.
Yeah, I'm
501c3
talking.
status
Yeah,
didn't
so
exist. America didn't
yeah,
exist.
obviously 501c3 status didn't exist, so you can't apply it to this debate because even now, churches that have 501c3
How
status
is it?
still have to pay taxes.
How
They
is it
just
not
don't
a
have to pay as
one-to-one
much
comparison
taxes.
to compare paying taxes to paying taxes?
So it's not a direct comparison, and it's not a good comparison at all because 501c3 status churches do have to pay taxes. They still do. So Jesus, so I can take your exact interpretation and I can say Jesus in that verse was saying that churches should be 501c3 status because when they are 501c3 status, they pay taxes.
Okay.
So the point is bringing up that verse is basically entirely meaningless. It says absolutely nothing about your point unless you're claiming that Jesus is specifically calling out 501c3 status, that is somehow illegitimate.
Well, I've already explained it's a Bible verse about paying taxes. So, and this is a debate about churches paying taxes. That's how it's relevant.
Yeah, so it isn't okay. Do you think that in any case in which a church can pay more taxes that they ought to pay more taxes?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you think that in any case that a church could pay more taxes, that they should pay more taxes?
That they could voluntarily pay more taxes, should they? No.
Okay, well then I don't see how this verse about Jesus saying this
But
has
part of
anything
taxation
to do with this at
part
all.
of taxation, tax is levied by force from the government. So it's not a could, they must, or they don't exist. As a building, as they could still exist, they could still do what Jesus did and go out in the field and just preach to people.
Okay, so you still haven't actually addressed the question of how exactly this verse relates to 501c3 at all. Because if your position isn't that in any
I've
case
answered
in
it
which
3
a
times.
church,
If you don't like my answer,
no,
it doesn't
you
mean that
haven't.
I didn't answer the question.
Well, because it doesn't eliminate any of the similar things. Because I already asked you if a church could pay more in taxes, should they pay more in taxes? Your answer is no. That's stupid.
Yeah, I don't like
but
the premise
at the same
of your
time,
question. You're
but
saying
at,
could
but
pay.
at the same time,
would they electively choose to pay more taxes?
Okay.
Tax
Let
part of
me
taxation is through
be
force.
more specific then. Let me be more specific then. If a church could sign up for a different tax bracket, they have a set of different tax brackets they could sign up for.
They can.
Like or yes,
they can
they can sign up for any of them.
They can opt to not be a 501c3, and
yes,
they can use a Form 99
should
to
they
not pay
always,
as much taxes.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is,
Should they
always go for the highest possible tax bracket if they can sign up for multiple tax brackets?
No, they should probably pick the one that's best for them.
Okay, well, that's your entire argument. That's your entire argument blown out of the water because in 501c3 they still have to pay some taxes.
Okay.
So basically, you're saying there's no reason that a church, you still haven't like provided a reason on this framework that you just laid out why they should avoid 501c3 and go for a different bracket.
Because they don't want to be beholden to the government. So they don't want to be under the 501c3. That's a reason. Maybe they end up paying more taxes.
Yeah, so
if they don't do the 501c3
so this
thing,
was
but
me
now,
asking about the verse in Matthew. The verse in Matthew does not say you should always pay the maximum amount of taxes that you can.
I never said that. That's a straw.
Well, the implication of your argument,
and Jesus didn't say that in Matthew either. So
okay, yeah. So I'll admit I don't remember exactly where the verse is.
Right,
but
that's a straw
the
man.
point
So
still
why
stands.
are you arguing with me about a verse you don't even know what I'm talking about?
So okay, I know about the Bible story. I don't remember the exact location of it. The fact that I don't remember the exact location of it is irrelevant. The point I'm making, basically,
you're very excited Why are you so amped up? Are you angry?
I do not care for your tone policing. The point I'm making here is you haven't actually shown why 501c3s are eliminated by the verse.
Yeah, they're not. But if I don't understand what you're saying. You're missing me.
The point I'm making is that the verse about taxes, where Jesus is talking about render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's, has nothing to do with 501c3 status. This debate is about 501c3 status. Therefore, that entire argument, as you basically admitted, is a red herring. It has nothing to do with the debate at all.
I'm saying churches should pay their taxes. They should not render their speech to the government in order to dodge taxes. So we take away the 501c3, and now they're paying property taxes and taxes on their income just like everybody else, but they can say what they want and they can support their political candidates. That 501c3 status is a welfare for churches.
Okay, so where in the Bible does Jesus say that churches ought support specific political candidates?
Nowhere.
Okay, yeah. So what you're saying, once again, falls flat on its face under the smallest amount of scrutiny.
Yeah, but that verse doesn't have to. The Bible doesn't have to apply to everything. I'm saying this is a political debate with religious undertones. So
yeah. So when I call into debates, I go after specific points because generally I don't have enough time.
Right, but you just jump to a different point.
No, I'm talking about this specific point right now. I'm talking about your use of Jesus's talk.
Right, you went from the religious aspect of it to the political aspect of it, and now I'm explaining you why the political aspect, why that is.
Yeah, and I'm saying that you bringing up the verse "render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's" is completely irrelevant and bears no holding on this debate at all.
It's a hour-long debate on not a huge topic. Like most of the videos and stuff you watch on this are going to be 3 to 10 minutes long, and we have to make an hour-long debate about it. I can't just focus on one thing. We have to talk about multiple different topics.
Yeah, well, I'm able to focus on one thing for my allotted time, so that's why
you didn't even do it in your question. You just jumped to a different one. You just jumped to the political thing.
All right. Well, we got some more people in the back here. So thank you, Adam, for coming up. I like your energy always.
That was fun.
Later, Adam.
See ya.
Adam always comes with the heat. What's up, John?
How's it going, guys? I just want to say, first off, you guys, your decorum and the way you guys handled yourself was phenomenal. So points on that for both people. I wanted to hit on this because at your closing statement, Josh, you had said that you had referenced Romans 13, and I noticed that you didn't read the full rest of the verse, where you said, well, if you pay them, if you owe taxes,
I
skipped
2 and 3, or 2, 3. Yeah, that was just for time.
I know, but I think the whole other part of the verse, because this is something that people who often bring up Romans 13 in reference to why we should be obliged to the authority of government or be paying taxes, is often lost upon us. But if you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. To me, the question I have for you is, wouldn't this then indicate that he's not really talking about the legality of or the moral efficacy of why a Christian should pay taxes or even oblige that as at the authority of government, but that whatever we render under Caesar, going back to the Matthew 22 and Mark 12 verses, that what you're looking at is him telling you, hey, because you remember at the end of that, the Pharisees marveled. So what that tells me is that they came for an answer, not expecting to get the one they did, which is to say, yes, if that's something that is something, don't bring politics into the church. I think that was Jesus's admonishment from that in those verses. But to me, this isn't so much about whether we should pay taxes, but rather that if we owe taxes, if we owe something, then we are obliging authority, because if we are honoring that. And going back to the parable that Jesus did with the debt collector, the whole point is if we owe a debt, I would try to ask that if you, with consideration of the rest of those verses in consideration, how could you believe that those verses indicate a pro-taxing or a pro-allowing of the church to be, or the church to be taxed from those statements alone.
Okay, so in order, I wrote down Romans 13, 1 through 6, and I cut out the middle section for time reasons, just to make it quicker. Just read the beginning and the end. But I don't think the part that I left out changes the it's not like I did that intentionally to be a snake to mislead people. I don't think adding those two verses to it changes the context of what he was saying. I think what he was saying is render unto your authorities, the authorities of the government are assigned by the powers and the principalities. So we have to render to those authorities. We have to follow the laws of the land. And yes, it is about debt, paying your debts. If one of your debts is to the government, if your debt to another man, you need to pay those debts. But one of the main themes of that chunk is to render to the authorities of the world and follow the laws of the land. I think that's a pretty consistent theme.
But when you read the rest of that verse there in Romans 13, he says, if respect due, this is not to me, I think it's clear that this is not a prescription for us going out of our way to pay taxes as Christians or in a church setting, but rather that if we are going to engage in that, because he says that render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, meaning if you're going to have a contract with Caesar, if you're going to use his money, then that is a right thing for you to do, to pay taxes, which is why I asked the question about decentralization.
Right.
Of
and the church does. The church uses, I guess, unfortunately in America, it's Biden's land or the Fed's land or whoever's land, but we use their land, we use the resources. So,
but when you agree that it's not so much about rendering unto what the government is, but rather following with our obligations, that the honor is in following our obligations. And if there's something that we have allowed ourselves to be obligated to, like paying taxes,
all the translations
we have to be weary of it.
All the translations make it very clear that he's talking about governments or authorities in government. That's what he's talking about.
So where's the honor come into that?
Well, he's just adding to it. It's not like the respect part like gets rid of everything he said before that. It's just an addition to it.
No, it just gives it context, right?
Well, no, it's an addition to the context. So if you owe honor, respect, render to the authorities, all these things, adding that verse doesn't make the case weaker. It makes the case.
But if you're subtracting the verses that I mentioned, then you are in fact going to gain or be more easily believing that is in fact what the context or what the verse entirely is saying. Also, when you compare that with the verses in both Matthew 22 and Mark 17, he says, give unto God what is God's, which is saying, of the things that are the government, give to the government. Of the things that are God's, give to God's. The whole point is that those things should be distinct, which is why not only should we not be dealing with 501c, and I guess not in the way that you would say, but in the way of not in the, I would say that for the benefit of 501c is that it avoids us having to get more involved. But I would say that this is about keeping a separation, because it's pretty clear that that's what to me, it's clear what this is what the verse is saying. And I appreciate you guys' time on this, but I just wanted your position, because I find that people, when they quote Romans 13, say that all the time, and they leave out that entire context, as well as
I didn't do that intentionally. That wasn't done to deceive people. That was just for time in the closing.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
well, thank you guys. Enjoy the debate.
All right, thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Just as a side note, from when you were talking with Adam there, part of the criteria of being recognized as a religion is having a physical place of worship. So if the government can force you out of that by taxation, you're then on that church is then on a slippery slope to being declared not a legitimate religious group. Just so we're clear.
So are you talking about like they had a temple and stuff?
Part of when you look up the criteria to what gets a religion recognition, part of that is having a physical place of worship.
So you're saying from like government's perspective, but not from a biblical
from the legality perspective under which they would be protected as a recognized religion, they would part of that criteria is a physical place of worship. It's not the only criteria, but once the government can close your doors via taxes, you're on a slippery slope to losing legitimacy as a religion legally.
I don't know. I think we should just have church in a field somewhere. Skip the government stuff. Just do it in a field, pass around a hat, collect some money, and then go help people with it.
All right. Evan.
Good morning, Evan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so this one was hard because I agree with both of you in some way. The first thing I wanted to state was that tithing is no longer a thing. That ended in the Old Testament. We're down into an offering. Benevolence, whichever one you want to call it. You can call it, giving to the church and giving to other people, whatever it may be. I think both of you made great arguments. There's one thing, and this is kind of anecdotal, but I don't know the actual name. I spent some time trying to figure it out, but I don't. There's a place called Apologia Studios, also Apologia Church. They're in Mesa, Arizona. And they have it's a I don't know what the tax exempt status is called. I tried to find it, but I couldn't. Where they can actually speak on who you should vote for, who you shouldn't vote for, things like that, because of their tax exempt status. And
I think I saw something about this. I can't remember what it's called either.
So Jeff Durbin, you can look it up. It's Jeff Durbin, James White. Their church is in Mesa, Arizona. And they can completely speak on anything they like because it isn't church-based. But that doesn't take away from Wally's argument about getting rid of the Johnson Act at all. I think that's actually awesome. But what I will say is that it's really hard to just completely say, hey, let's take it away, because I feel like there is some power in having that tax exempt status. And then if we have no tax exempt status, when can the government just step in and say, hey, man, we're going to do whatever we want. We're going to say whatever we want. So I get both of you guys' arguments. But I do just want to say that thank you both for coming up and talking about this, because I think it's a very important subject. But again, I do think that both of you made good arguments. I do think Wally hit it with that the Johnson Act should be repealed. Yeah. But at the same time, as we have those other statuses, I think that we can say, hey, it's a church, right? But then when we have those tax exempt things, we have Scientology, we have Mormonism, we have all these things that aren't real religions. They're just, no offense to anybody who's any of those things, but they're cults. And so I do get what you both are saying, and I thank you both for coming on. The only thing I wanted to ask is what you guys thought on the topic of tithing, because tithing, as far as I understand it, is gone, right? It's an offering nowadays, right? And that shouldn't be taxed. I don't think your offering should be taxed, but I don't know what you guys think on that.
Yeah, I talked about this with my chat before. I've said I don't think tithing has to be money. You could give time, you could give effort, even if you don't go to a church. Say you were cast away on a desert island somewhere, and you were alone. You could tithe 10% of your time to prayer. You could Go ahead.
But that would also be something where, as far as an offering, even if it's not monetary, like you can still, at that point, I believe, under the current designation, someone who's like, if you're an electrician and you offer to you just do the electrical maintenance for your church on your own time, and you consider that a donation of your services, there are still ways you could probably, they could probably benefit from that on their end, of being able to say, hey, I wrote this, this is like a charitable act as a part of my business, which is, again, is something that would be lost as a benefit. Now, again, whether as we could beat to death, it's if someone's doing it exclusively for that, you can say, yeah, they're doing it for the wrong reason. But even if they are doing it for the right reason, they still should have that benefit be there for them, because they have to operate within that system, and any little bit that helps somebody for doing the right thing should be available to them.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So again,
but Evan, you would agree. So you would agree, Evan, on the record, that you would support 100% chopping away the government's Johnson.
Yeah. Okay, this is the hard part. Yes, but
We're
there's
gonna
like
take
that little tiny
axe
part
to
of
the
me that gets
Johnson.
scared
Yes.
and says, "Hey, what then if we have nothing? We have no foothold in government. What do we do? If the government isn't in it at all, right? And which is great. Which I agree with your point, like the marriage. I think marriage should be completely out of the state. It should be only in church. I get your point, but how then do we do that? How do we make sure that the government can't just come and take our churches? Because I don't agree with JS. The one thing he says, "We're two or more gathered." I don't believe in that whole thing. I think church, yes, is all of us, but I also think that it's a place that we gather. And I don't think if there's one or two of us are gathering, I don't think it's really much of anything. I don't get me wrong. There's places where that works.
So if there's no
but,
building, then it's not a church.
Well, by
I'm
the
not saying
field
there's no
logic,
building.
let's apply the field logic here, JS. I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, Evan's a Christian, Easy's a Christian. This is a body of Christ. Easy shouldn't have to pay taxes to the Canadian government.
Based.
Yeah. I'm just saying the church part, though, right? I know it's not a building, but it is a place where we gather. And like, I know people who sit around with their family and watch it on TV. I don't think that's really church, man. I think you're just watching a movie that has to do with church.
There are people that bring people to their property and start like a commune, and then they say that now my house and my land is a church, so I don't have to pay.
And that's what I don't like. I get it, but that's why I like Christian nationalism, though, because we would say that those things aren't a religion. You can have your cult, go for it, be a weirdo, but it's not a religion any longer.
Right. So we have to get, but then with the way the current, the Constitution and all that stuff, without Christian nationalism, you can't discriminate and say, well, that doesn't count as a religious group, but this does.
Whoa, hang on. That's what I'm saying.
Well, again, like
you can't worship who you want to worship. I'm saying you're not the Christian church. We're talking about the Christian church, right?
But what if they call themselves Christians, but they got some crazy doctrine?
Right, exactly. Like Mormons and JWs. They call themselves Christians, but it's crazy. One of them is Satan's brother. The other one is he's a created being. I forget.
Archangel Michael, Jehovah's Witness.
We're talking about the 501(c)(3) status or tax exempt status for a Christian church, right?
Yes, and bringing people into your house and saying, well, now this is a church just isn't that simple, because that's got something that's also completely separate from just a 501(c)(3). Now you're actually having to get that property zoned as a place of worship into it.
Right. And that's the thing. That's why it's really hard for me on this one, because I do believe that you should be able to have small groups at your house and still be related to the church. So this is why it's like I really like the disseminating destroying the Johnson Act, but at the same time, then I fear, what do we do if the government comes after us, right? And just claims every religion or whatever it is some crazy thing, and they can just do whatever they want. They can, I don't know. I feel like there's some sort of like downfall that would come from us not having anything, any foothold in the government.
Right. Well, separation of church and state is the government shouldn't be getting involved in the church.
But that's
the
federal
church should
papers.
be
That's
able
Thomas
to.
Jefferson. That's not constitutional.
Well, I mean, establishment clause
So
is constitutional.
Sure, but I mean, yes, it's sure. Okay, I do agree with that. But what I'm saying is that it's really hard, because I like what both of you are saying, but I think Wally does have an edge on the end because the government shouldn't be involved. But then I really like you, JS, and that there's like a 10% of it that says, you know what, fear the government if we're not doing, as you said, what was it, Matthew? What was it? Give
22.
to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God's what is God's. If you're not giving to Caesar, what are they going to do?
Right.
So
they're going to have some power over you.
Well, they figured out
you a benefit.
They figured out the solution.
Bars were open, churches
for
were
them
during COVID, so they did have some sort of power over us.
Yes, and the solution for them is that they have speech laws in place that leverage the 501(c)(3). That's why the shortest way to the solution is you can keep the tax exemption, you can keep the financial shield from the government, just get rid of the speech laws.
Okay,
get rid of the
I agree with that.
punishment.
Okay.
And then and then not only are we keeping money that is offered to churches away from the government, but then the speech of that church is not beholden to the government.
Right. I just want to have some sort of foothold in the government. I understand separate church and state, JS, but I do want to have some sort of foothold and say, hey, man, back the hell off. And so I think that's a decent compromise what Wally just said right there. So
yeah,
that right there, we actually are at that point, like we gain the leverage because we have the ability to not only like mobilize on policy and endorsement, but they can't completely like dip into the wallet and take that away from the church and say, well, now we're going to be able to financially punish you. Well, no, they can't.
Right.
That bar analogy that you brought up popped something into my head that I thought about. I wrote it down somewhere, but I didn't think of it. So let's say you have a bar. This might be a horrible analogy, but it's a fun one. Let's say you have a bar and you have women's only night, and then men dressed as women start coming to your bar to get into women's only night, or not. I'm sorry, not women's only night, but women get in free night. And so men start showing up dressed as women to get in free, and you say, I'm not going to allow that. And then some discrimination law happens where they say, well, you can't discriminate against them. If they identify as a woman, you have to let them into your bar for free. So you either get your door shut on your bar, or you just get rid of the women's only night that you never should have had in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Which side are you on though? Because I would say,
I'm saying like the 501c3 tax exemption is like the women's only night, and then the
no, it isn't. In that case, it would be like the problem there would be the discrimination law, because you're not able to address the precise problem, which is the bad faith action, because they're saying, hey, if you don't let these cross-dressers in, we're going to close your bar down if you don't give them free service or free entry. So really, at that point, the problem is not the existence of the women's only night on its face. The problem is the ramification law put behind it by the discrimination law.
Right.
So the real solution there is to get rid of discrimination laws.
But when Christians aren't getting involved in government and commies are running the government, and we're not voting and we're not being active, and the church isn't active in government, we get more of those things.
Right. And you both understand why I brought up that argument, right?
I mean, you could also just say, okay, I'm gonna let them in, but I clearly have a percentage of my patronage that's demonically possessed, so I'm also gonna let in an exorcist.
Right. You might start letting them in just so that the government can have its thumb on you, because you don't.
Well, and then, as I said, they clearly are in need of an exorcist because they're all suffering from demonic possession.
That's what's happening with the tax exempt status.
Right, but you understand what I was saying, right? If we don't have a foothold somehow in the government, the COVID-19 thing can happen. Oh, sorry, crap. The Schmovid, whatever. Yeah, my bad.
I think you can say that.
It happened because we didn't have that foothold. Why were you allowed to go to a bar? Why was I allowed to go buy booze, or marijuana, but I couldn't do other things?
The church is
stupidest
closed.
Thing in the world. So, right, that's what I'm saying. So if we don't have some sort of foothold, and that's what freaks me out. That's why I somewhat just agree with you, JS, but I think Wicked Wally nails it a little bit more, that maybe if we got the Johnson Act out of the way and built a new society of rules, I think we'd be in a better place.
Yeah.
So that's it.
All right.
Yeah, he got me with the Johnson Act thing. I didn't see that in any of my research. I don't know if that gets you an instant W, but it's a good compromise.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan.
This is the one case where we are advocating for based Johnson removal.
All right. Unless anyone else, and we do have a few more super chats we'll read after the call-ins here, because we've gotten them during the call-ins. But we have one more caller, unless anyone wants to come up. I put the link again there in the chat. Our next caller.
Hello there.
Hey, before Buff starts going, also I want to say, while I was looking into this, like I told that other guy, all the YouTube videos and stuff were like 3 to 10 minutes. Some guy talking about it, opinionated, bias from his perspective. I could not find a single debate on YouTube about this topic. So this is a first.
What's up.
This is going to be studied now for years.
That's what's up.
All right. Sorry, Buff.
No, I have heard of the Johnson Act, and I was interested. I was interested when you brought that up, Wally. I was like, huh, interesting, slight point. It was. I don't think I watched the debate tonight. I think I watched two guys expressing their points on each side, and you both talking about them and reaching a compromise. But either way, it was a great conversation. It was fun to watch, nonetheless.
I would argue I don't necessarily think removing the Johnson Act is a compromise. If anything, it's addressing the point that we don't need to remove the tax exempt status at all, and that would negate the entire debate at that point.
Yeah.
Well, would it?
But also coming to a compromise in a debate and having a good conversation doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't a debate.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it was still enjoyable to watch. I'll give you that.
Look, from now now until the end of time, we have a positive use of the term "hack off the government's Johnson."
Yeah. And coming into this, I even said, like, this is not a hill I would die on. You know, this is something we could have talked about for 5 minutes and had a little back and forth about it. But then when you gotta really look into it and turn it into an opening closing statement, an hour-long debate, then I did the best I could.
No, you guys did good, man. You both did good. So what did you want to address there, Buff?
Just the go back on, I was trying to get some basis on what I was talking about earlier about the it's like who should be tax exempt, who shouldn't be, the consideration of what a church actually is, and into the deeper realm of actually the satanic church, about whether them being tax exempt or not. And y'all got into a point about, I think it was you, Wally, I think, about if they provide knowledge. It may have been Josh. I don't remember which one of you were talking about that, but it should be based on an institution that actually provides knowledge. What does it say the satanic church does not provide knowledge? I'm not standing up for them.
Because the satanic church, if we're talking about just from purely the basis of the satanic church as it exists, as was influenced by the writings of Anton LaVey, it's not based on really any kind of actual anything that's supported in Christianity. He just sat down one day, wrote a book, and made it up. Similar to L. Ron Hubbard. So neither one of those would actually be a system of legitimate spirituality or religion as I would personally consider it. Because he basically tried to come up with an inversion of Christianity for the sake of creating an inversion of Christianity based on his own understanding of everything. So if it were up to me, the Satanic Temple would not be recognized as a legitimate religion by any conceivable measure.
So a book written
now again, the system as it exists, they can go if they are told you can't be a 501c3 religion, the current framework would allow them to go in and say, okay, well, maybe we're going to advocate that we're like an educational group. Now, again, that would require reforming the current framework that everything operates under, which would be a whole different process.
So what about the Mormon religion?
I think it's heretical, but that's me.
You only believe in Orthodox. So you're saying something, religion based on a book written by a man shouldn't be recognized?
The book was, so you're talking, is this supposed to tie back into like the Bible versus Joseph Smith making his own?
No, just the Bible altogether, book written by men. So
well,
gives him the right.
Fireworks are freaking my dog out, and he just came and threw up on my
floor.
Oh, shit.
Well, Joseph Smith is heretical because, as I understand it, there can be no new revelation. And that's what he proclaimed to have. That is what would make it a heresy to Christianity. Now versus how the Bible or how Christian scripture was assembled, that's completely different. That like the full breadth of the history of that is outside my personal area of expertise. So I can only speak to that to a very broad point. So I'm not the best person to provide a full defense of that.
All right, just want to get your thoughts on that. I yield my rest of my time.
All right. Well, thank you for coming up. I appreciate it. All righty. Well, we don't have any. Is there any last callers out there that want to pop up quickly? Now is your chance to forever. Hold your peace. Okay. Let me put the link there for you one more time. We did have a couple more super chats to read here. Crazy. Oh, wait. First, Siege D with the $5 super chat. Even though I'm Catholic, a heretic based on what a heretic, sorry, based on what Wally says. This was an important topic for me to listen to. Learned a lot. Thanks, Wally. Easy JS. Appreciate you, Siege.
Just for the record, Siege, I was born Catholic, raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I got no beef with Catholics. Some of my best friends are Catholics.
Crazy Zark with the $5 super chat says, why is Adam always so mad? And Adam, would Jesus want churches to not pay taxes as long as they censor themselves? Well,
I don't think so.
Adam, that's a question to think about for you, Adam. Any of you want to answer that?
Yeah, I don't think they would. I think that's maybe Wally, but that's my whole.
That's why the Johnson Act is a problem, because it could be construed as a direct interference in what would be a Christian ethic, which would be to prioritize telling the truth. And if the truth is to outright say this person is completely against the proper Christian doctrine versus this other person, we should be able to proclaim that freely and not be confined by a speech law that prevents spiritual leaders from telling their congregations so.
All right. We got John the Wise Tushy, $10. Speakeasy, thank you for hosting. Rocking the Crucible gear tonight. Word. Not quite sure how to frame my question, but how is BLM and PPFA 503c3 status equal to a church? I am baffled. Help me out, please.
Because they help the community. You didn't know that? You didn't know that Planned Parenthood and Black Lives Matter help the community?
Community meaning their own family members.
Yeah, get some man.
Yeah,
some
and that's the
TikTok
thing, is that
houses.
it's and this is why I say these are points that I would easily agree with, is that I don't believe organizations such as Planned Parenthood should be protected at all, but reforming the entire system outside of when we're specifically talking about the religions is a little bit off topic. That could be a whole other 2-hour-long debate over how we would go about reforming the entirety of the system.
I think it was originally just for religious groups, but then it became like, as long as you can show that you're doing positive good for the community more than you're profiting. And so, yeah, and it's all loose definitions, like who
well, because
determines
you can make the argument, and this is why you have so many like scientific and medical based charity groups that exist, is that, if you're the American Diabetes Association, what are you primarily focused on doing? Well, you're trying to provide financial assistance for diabetics in need where their health insurance isn't adequate, and you're also wanting to raise money to find a cure for diabetes. Now, that's a long-term goal. You're not going to see a return on investment from that year over year. Like, you have to wait for the research to actually be discovered and come into existence. And so they're paying for that research to be done. There's a case to be made there that, yes, it is a science. That's why there is scientific geared charities that are exempt under that as well. So there's a
Right.
case to be made in those situations. Same thing with, funding cancer research. Right now, it's like, because you don't actually have a cure for cancer or diabetes to offer people that can then be improved, you don't have a product at the moment. So it's not like saying we can get a return on investment for a less effective cure for cancer while we make better ones. It's like, no, we need to find one at all.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, John, for the super chat. Siege D with another super chat. Said, yo, easy. Not sure how long you're going, but if she's still live and there's no other channels to redirect to, can we raid at Culture Club USA's live? Like I said, I'm going to probably do an after show. I'll either open up a panel or panel hop, whatever is happening. If people want to come up on panel, I'll do an open panel. But yeah, I mean, if they're still live after that, I could. John the Wise Tushy with another 10 super chat. Thank you. If I know 503c3s are charitable orgs, but how do you distinguish between religious and activism orgs when it comes to free political speech? Eliminate the Johnson Amendment. You know that is never going to. Probably going to happen, was going to say. Probably didn't have enough.
I've been agreeing with John, but I don't like the "that's never going to happen" argument. I think that's not with that mentality. It's not. That's what I always say. Can't, never, could.
Yeah, there are ways you can effectively lobby for repealing the Johnson Amendment without violating the Johnson Amendment. But
I think he's saying if we get rid of the Johnson Amendment, how does that affect the other 501c3 who aren't churches? But
yeah, and that's where it's dragging in the the other issue of how do we reform the whole system, which again, that's you'd be looking at some different prescriptions in that case, where if we're just looking at taking the cuffs off the churches, the Johnson Amendment would be the most effective way to do so.
Yeah. And I didn't want this to turn into an all taxation argument because I don't know a whole lot about taxes. You're right. Like, this is actually a super boring topic, by the way. Like, taxes and IRS stuff, and this stuff is.
Well, it can be in a way, but I think it's an important topic. That's the thing. And this is like you just said, you didn't find any debates when you went to go search this up about it. And I think that speaks numbers on how much people should probably be learning about this stuff.
And they make it complicated on purpose.
We're going to, I guarantee, people go start YouTube searching, should churches be tax exempt tomorrow? This is going to be at the top of the algorithm because it's going to be the only long-form debate on the topic, and it happens right here.
Yeah.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Thank you again, John the Wise Tushy. And then we got John Mosman. How many Johns are in this community? It seems like I met a new one on every stream.
Enough Johns that I'm surprised we don't attract prostitutes.
Wally's got to come in with the late dad joke. I love it. Love it. All right. Well, do you guys have any final words? Make sure you guys also, I want you guys to make sure you shout your channels out where everyone could find you, what you do, And I'm going to also, I'm setting it up right now as we speak. I'm going to be doing a little after show. So if anyone wants to come up on the open panel, we'll do an open panel. If not, I'll end up just I got a few things I can do. There's some things I can react to. I always got content ready. That's what we do over here, okay? I also have an announcement to make after you guys give you a little final words here.
Yeah. You want to go first, Wally?
Look for me on Verbal Combat tomorrow night, as usual. where the Axeman will continue to reign terror. Also, next Saturday, the 13th, me versus Teriak with the Verbal Combat War Chamber of Random Debates. That's going to be a damn good time. And once again, Jace, thank you for coming on. I think we had a nice spirited back and forth on this. And if there is any point to take away from this for everybody watching, hack off the government's Johnson.
Metaphorically, of course.
Metaphorically. Grand Theft Auto, hack off the government's Johnson.
My channel is JS Urban Adventures. On Monday nights, I do a news, reaction, politics, theology, conspiracy theories, all sorts of stuff we cover on there. Funny news, memes. Every Monday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 6 to 9 Pacific time, or no, I guess it's 5 to 8 Pacific time. And that's the Dreaded Conservative show. The Discord is Dreaded Conservative. But the dreads are coming off soon, so I might have to rebrand. But and I do streams.
Why? You have like a plan or something? Why are you doing that? You just don't want to deal with them no more?
Yeah, I've wanted to cut them off for a couple years now, and I just haven't.
Oh, okay.
I've wanted to do it, and I keep saying summertime I'm going to do it. Summertime I'm going to do it. And then I told my YouTube, I said when I get to 5,000 subscribers, I'll do it. So it's basically y'all are going to hold me accountable because I've been wanting to do this for a while. And,
okay.
It's just too much, and the pulling back is starting to thin the front of my hair, and I don't want to. I don't want to go bald early, so I'm just gonna chop.
So you're gonna be the undreaded conservative,
right? Well, it's a pun, so I guess I'll still be the dreaded conservative, but I just won't have the dreadlocks.
You'll just miss the punchline.
Yeah, they won't have the double entendre anymore. But yeah, and I do streams, I do Discord panels and reactions to stuff and all kinds of stuff like that.
Word. Well, listen, I appreciate you both for being here tonight. It's been fucking amazing. You guys both, again, you guys did amazing. Chat, make sure you guys go and hit their links. Go subscribe. Go watch. Okay, give them support for putting in this work tonight. They both did amazing. Like I said, I had to do next to no moderation, which was awesome. I mean, I was expecting more, but it's not a disappointment in any way. It's just surprising.
When you book the right debate, moderating a debate can be a night off.
Yeah.
True. This is true. Yeah, that is true.
Before we close up again, so JS, are you pro or anti-prohibition?
I think prohibition had a lot of positive. I'll do that one with you on St. Patty's Day.
Oh, for real?
Okay, we're gonna have to put a bookmark in this for March 2025. Prohibition on St. Patty's.
A lot of that prohibition didn't work stuff is fake revisionist history. I think it worked great.
Well, don't worry. The FBI is going to capture that pesky Al Capone any day now and disband as it was intended.
All right. Well, I don't think people are going to want to wait a whole year for that, but I can definitely. I'm going to hit you both up, and we'll figure out a setup
put it
for
in
this.
verbal combat one night or something.
I could do that too. Yeah.
Also, I was thinking internet anonymity in verbal combat would be a good one.
I like the one I put in the topics.
Oh, okay. I get what. Like basically.
Do you support? I don't like internet anonymity. I think it's whack. But most people would say that it's necessary and it's good.
Yeah. I'm surprised. Yeah, I'd like to hear your take on that sometime too. Yeah,
I'm hoping
write these down to put into verbal combat as well.
Everybody hated on Nikki Haley when she brought it up, and I was like, I think that's actually kind of based. Like,
damn. All right. Well, yeah, I'll definitely fucking.
I've been
Like I said, we got lots of debates to go on this show. Verbal combat, only plan for it to get fucking bigger from here. So yeah, these are good topics.
that's
I'm
why
always coming up with topics based off things that happen throughout the week, and that's usually what makes the topics for the end of the week. But I have a bunch that are already archived for when I don't have any.
That's why I'm hoping next Saturday is a big hit, because I think having like that 1v1 VK format could be a big hit on top of that.
Word. Yeah, for sure.
I'm anxious to get into the one I put in the topic suggestion last night, because I've argued that with some of my friends before, and I think I'm ready to start bringing that out into the public. Because I don't know if you're in the Discord, JS, but I put it up there. I know Easy saw it, but I said, is there any, basically it's saying like, are there any situations under which digital media piracy could be considered permissible?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I'm definitely gonna check that, get that one into the verbal
I
combat.
have a take on that I don't think anyone is really prepared to hear. So I'm interested to see.
Don't say it yet. Don't say it yet.
Giving up the game. Don't worry, Easy. I ain't
Don't
giving up the game.
Yeah. I can usually only get in like the first hour of verbal combat, but I'll try to jump in that tomorrow night. But if you do a panel after this, I'll go to that because I got the night off. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you guys want to come up on open panel and just bring up topics, you definitely can. So, like, yeah, give me like I have it scheduled for 15 minutes from now. So, yeah, I'm just gonna shut this one down and then start that one up.
Cool.
All
right. Again, thank you both for being here. I appreciate y'all. And yeah, if you wanna, I'll see you in 15 minutes.
All right, see you. Thanks for hosting it. Thanks.
Pleasure.
No problem at all.
I gotta figure out how to get out of here.
Yeah,
All right, stream. Should fireworks are going crazy right now. I'm actually gonna go walk Echo. And I think I might end this stream so that there's just the debate, basically. And then I might go into Easy's panel and share his stream to my channel. There's a way to do that. I've never done it before, but I might try that. But thank you, Amanda. Sorry I wasn't reading chat the whole time. I was trying to be focused. That one kid, Adam, he came in hot, huh? I think I handled it pretty well though. But I'm gonna go. Hey, thank you, Vengeful Truther, liked and sub, bud. Wally got a nice shirt. I think it gave him a +10 to dad jokes. My wallet is charity now, similar to John Smith. I missed a lot of what Buff said because Echo came in here freaking out from the fireworks, and then he threw up right by my feet. And he's sitting here right now. He like gets right next to me. He's like, pet me, pet me, pet me. But Adam is EO. I don't know what that means. You should debate that Adam kid. I mean, I would, but he seems very intense. And I've seen him on a lot of panels, and he calls into the Crucible and asks them questions too. So I've seen him before. That wasn't my first time seeing him. But we might go outside and watch the fireworks, and if he'll even go outside, I don't know if he will. So I'll probably end this stream and then try to take Echo for a walk, see if he'll go outside, help him get more like accustomed to the fireworks. And then I'll jump on Easy stream and I'll try to share his stream to this channel. And then that way you guys can come to my channel but we'll still be able to see your chats in his StreamYard. So he'll still be able to see you guys' chats because the way I had it set up, we talked about it beforehand, and I was like, I don't have enough time to set it all up because you got to do a title and all that stuff. And I was like, next time we'll do it that way. But so if you see a link on my channel in like 15, 20 minutes, then you can watch from my channel. If you don't, you can just go to Easy's channel. I think you can just YouTube Speakeasy and you'll find it. There's a link in the description of this for his channel. There's a link for Wally's channel, so you guys can go subscribe to both of them. Wally doesn't have any like content up yet, but he's gonna start doing some stuff. So go give him a sub, go give Easy a sub, and then if you see something on my channel, you can watch it there, or you can watch it on his channel, whatever. And make sure you guys hit the like button on the way out. If you want to help out the channel financially, I have super chat option, but some people tell me there is no super chat option. I think it's because most of my streams get demonetized real quick. But you know, the best way is the Cashapp because they don't take 30% like YouTube does. It's Dreadedconservative on Cashapp. But you know, we don't expect any of that. But if you want to send me some pizza and beer money, then you can hit it up. But I'm going to end this, and I will see you guys either back here in a little while or over on Easy's channel. So catch you later. No super chat option ever. See, that doesn't make any sense. I don't. Cash App only. I don't know why there's no super chat option. You can be a member. You guys are members. I'm still monetized. I don't know why they don't give a super chat option on any of my streams. I think maybe it's because I play too much copyright stuff. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's a mess. So we don't make any money off of YouTube hardly. Basically, I make like if a short gets 10,000 views, I'll make like $2 off of that. Off of my old videos, I make a little bit of recurring money. It's basically like $100 every 2 or 3 months. So member grifting, but no supas. Oh, member gifting. I am grifting. We are grifting right now. There's only a member gifting option, no super chats. Huh. Whatever. That's fine. Cash App's better. Venmo and PayPal. All that stuff's in the description. It's just JS Urban Adventures on Venmo, JS Urban Adventures on PayPal, Dreaded Conservative on Cash App. But anyway, enough grifting. I'm going to head out, guys. I will be back shortly, either on his stream or here, whatever it is. But God bless everybody. Have a good night. That was a lot of fun. I'll see you shortly.